on. If you're watching this, listen up. Whatever they tell you, don't go to Mars. Our world may be dying, but death waits all who journey there. I've been there. It's hell in the skies. You mustn't.
Jezero Crater. Over 247,570 million kilometers from Earth. The Ancient Path, I fondly called it. An old riverbed 10 times wider than the Mekong back on Earth. Throughout the years, expeditions to Mars have been a fascinating endeavor by man. And one thing has remained the same. Evidence of water. Or rather, things that point back to water. Water is the only known element capable of sustaining life. Where there's water, there's the possibility for life, or the semblance of it. Everything under the sun has its beginning and its end. Alas, the Earth was gradually dwindling to its end from years of pollution and toxins that badly contaminated the air, causing it to shorten the life expectancy of the average living being. Then the Third World War happened, fragmenting an already broken world. Plants died. Millions of men, women, and children died. The ecosystem was pleading for mercy, and its wrath still hammered on mankind. The predator had become prey. The phrase "life begins at 40" was now cheered as long life. The planet's prognosis predicts that within the next 100 years, the Earth's core would freeze over. We had to find a new home, which brings us here. Now. For years, Jezero Crater has been a landing site for Martian expeditions from the Earth. The planet itself was inhabitable mainly due to its air, which was very thin with oxygen. Yet pictures from the Delta probe showed dried-up puddles of mud. And where there's mud, there must be liquid. 345 days ago, the first human-piloted expedition to Mars was commissioned by NATO, with 2 objectives: find the source of the puddles, and carve out a niche underground, wide enough to sustain life.
John, buddy, come look at this.
It's Steven, I said, as I walked over to him tentatively. We had been burrowing into the ground for the last hour, and had finally hit what seemed to be a dead end. The burrow was as wide as a school bus. Ignoring my correction, Carlo Rizzi kept pointing at the wall in front of him. My eyes widened as I drew near, spotting what was there, as if I was in a trance. "Those are
hieroglyphs,"
Carlo said, completing my sentence. "Yes, they are," I replied, more to myself than to him.
"Santa Maria. There's blood in the lines,"
Carlo Rizzi said in his thick accent. "I see that, Carlo." My eyes darted around the symbols with dried blood traced along the engravings.
"What should we do? I stopped working the Chronos at this point,"
he said, referring to the drill. "Do we have a semiotician on the team?"
"A semi-what now?"
"Someone who can read this."
"Oh, yes, senor. We do,"
Carlos said, staring at me like a dog expecting his master's pat on the head. Yeah, if he wanted praise, he could start by remembering my name. "Well, go get whoever it is. Hurry." When NATO commissioned the expedition, they called it, with an attempt at grim levity, the Exhumer. At the time, it felt out of place. Still does. Yet with this recent finding, it only proved one thing. NATO knew more than they were letting on. Why else would they send an 11-man crew on a supposed mission to save the Earth? Sounded like bullcrap to me. We all knew life on Mars was a tenuous bet at best, a dazzling mirage in the desert. Yet it still didn't explain why a drill site engineer, a semiotician, a specialized fossil collector, a marine biologist, and 6 handymen for hands-on assistance to the drill engineer, according to the short briefing I got, which also sounded like bullcrap. They spoke in seemingly rehearsed speech patterns all through the 300-day journey, except for Carlos, who seemed to be excessively chatty. I stepped closer, as if by doing so I would be able to unlock the symbol's secrets. Then I heard footsteps from behind me and turned. Because of the lessened effect of gravity on Mars, moving around was way easier, with protective gear, of course. A black spandex bodysuit that looked like clothes but covered every visible part of the body. Attached to each suit is a slender silver reusable oxygen tank, which drains the water vapor in the air surrounding it of impurities, allowing it to become breathable. The suit's mask had visors, which gave off a bluish glow from within to lighten the face of its host.
Dr. Stephen Twain, I presume,
a man said, coming from behind the drill machine with his right arm stretched out for a firm handshake. You presume? I asked, puzzled. We've been on the same ship for 300 days, and you presume?
Well, forgive me if I hurt your feelings, but I don't have the time for pleasantries. I'm James Gunn,
he said, withdrawing his hand. You must be the semiotician.
I am,
he said with stoicism.
Step aside, please,
he added coldly, the subtext being, stay out of my way, and I'll stay out of yours. Without saying a word, I stepped aside to give him a broad view of the wall behind me, which was covered in hieroglyphs. It seemed out of all of our crew members, Carlo Rizzi was the only one I knew by name. The eccentric man named James Gunn walked over and scrutinized it for a while.
Some of these symbols match the ones in the Pyramid of Giza.
How do you mean? I asked, the creases on my forehead thickening.
Because of these markings in particular, Dr. Twain,
he said, pointing at 6 symbols in particular. Symbols shaped like something out of a fantasy story. What do they mean?
According to the Afro-Asiatic language of ancient Egypt, it means death stood by the door, too frightened to go in. That is, of course, an ad hoc, approximate translation, but...
The words caused a stillness in the deep cave. It could almost be touched.
Mr. Twain, are you with us?
The semiotician named James said, snapping me out of my own thoughts.
This is a groundbreaking discovery, my friend.
Friend, I thought to myself. So, we're friends now. There was excitement in his tone of voice. I'm glad you feel excited about this, but I feel this poses more threat than just being a groundbreaking discovery.
How do you mean, Mr. Twain?
James asked with an arched eyebrow, which gave the blue tint within his visor a slightly eerie look. It's clearly a warning. We need to pull back before it's too late.
That's not your call to make.
It's my ship, I retorted point blankly.
And my orders are to find a niche and make it suitable for life. As far as I'm concerned, you answer to those orders too.
He paused for a beat.
We can't afford to fail, Stephen. It's unacceptable.
Without saying another word to me, he took a few pictures using a portable Nikon D4 SLR camera designed to capture images outside space or on another planet. Then he turned and signaled Carlo to continue drilling. A part of me strongly felt this semiotician was nuts more than he showed. Suicidal kind of nuts. Carlo turned the key in the ignition, causing the beast Cronus to roar to life with zest and a hunger to obliterate anything in its path. Due to a lower intensity of gravity on Mars, Movement was easier than it was back on Earth. Burrowing through the hole-like wall in front of them, it didn't take long for Cronus to burst into an opening.
Mr. Gunn, would you have a look at this?
Carlo Rizzi said as he backed up the excavator a few feet, giving James and me room to gaze at the sight that lay beyond. From the headlights of the excavator, it didn't take long for my jaw to drop, awestruck by what my eyes were taking in. Stepping closer, like Alice about to walk through the looking glass, only this was more of a terrifying sight than it was a wonder, I looked to my right to see a speechless James Gunn. "Not so chatty now, are you?" I said in mind. The cave-like structure itself was no cave at all as we stepped through the opening. The ceiling of the cave was as tall as 2 Eiffel Towers put together, and dotted at strategic positions around the cave's ceiling were blue, glowing jellyfish-looking creatures that seemed to pulsate with life, some of them bigger than others. The ceiling itself seemed to span as wide as the Grand Canyon, but what drew my attention more was what lay in front of us. Ruins of a civilization that had once, probably millions of years ago, thrived in this place. Though spectacular in itself, that too was not the jaw-dropping part. The debris scattered around farther than the eye could see from my vantage point had striking similarities to materials found on Earth. Parts of what looked like roofs, windows, and even desiccated human limbs dotted the whole place. Whatever this place was, life had once thrived in it.
"Mr. Gunn,"
Carlos said, snapping me out of my visual assessment of anything that lay before me, at least the ones my eyes could feed on at that moment.
"they're here."
He added, and I turned.
"Oh, let them in, please,"
James said hurriedly. "You know more than you're telling me, don't you?" I didn't trust him for an instant.
"Bloody hell, would you look at that?"
A lady said from behind us, giving James a reason to evade the question. 6 other men followed behind her with looks of shock on their faces.
"Mr. Twain, meet Becky Sanders, marine biologist,"
James said, stretching an open palm to the lady who spoke a few moments ago.
"Sanders, Stephen Twain."
"Nice to meet you, Stephen,"
she said with an outstretched arm. First name basis all of a sudden, I pondered. "And we've been on the same ship for almost a year," I almost yelled out. "Nice to meet you too, Miss Sanders," I said as I took her hand in a firm grip.
"Oh, please, call me Becky. You probably just made history from the looks of it."
I laughed in response, which was strange given our current surrounding.
"And that's Steve Rogers, fossil collector,"
James said. "Nice to meet you," I said gingerly, since that seemed to be a mock form of greeting around here. "We've been on the same ship for almost a year," he said with a forced grin, and just walked past me to unload his gear.
"Don't mind Steve,"
Becky said with a casual shrug.
"Always the ambitious one."
"What about these guys?" I said, referring to the other 5 men who had walked in with Becky and Steve.
"They're handymen,"
James retorted quickly. "Obviously, but I mean, shouldn't I know their names?"
"Handyman 1 to 5. 6 stays on the ship,"
he replied matter-of-factly.
"All right, boys, saddle up. Let's spread out,"
Steve said over my shoulders. Apparently, he had gotten all his tools in place. The 5 handymen systematically split themselves in twos, the last one tagging along with Steve.
"You two, with me,"
Steve said, nodding to Becky and me. "On second thoughts, we're gonna need you, sir," he added, referring to James Gunn. We started for the wide path right in front of us while the other pair of handymen split up, a pair of 2 to the right and a pair of two to the left, leaving Carlo behind by the entrance. As we slowly ambled on further inward, the bluish glow overhead seemed to shimmer as it pulsated, casting shadows in corners and giving glimpses of what was once a housing settlement of some sorts. Medieval looking, but curiously advanced in unexpected ways. Beyond its time. And perhaps ours, too. 60 seconds in, and we heard it. A low growl at first. A growl that sounded barely human. More like something or someone that had lost all touch with its original reality. She's watching. It said with an eerie whisper loud enough to catch our attention.
What the fuck was that?
Becky blurted out. It came from over there. James pointed over to a heap of loose debris to the right. Debris of what used to be a small house, which lay now in dilapidation. She sees it all. The guttural voice said again, closer this time. Steve pulled out a weapon and pointed it in the direction of the grotesque-sounding voice. I didn't even know we were allowed to have guns. What the hell was going on, I pondered to myself. Clearly, NATO knew more than they were letting on. Then something whispered from behind me. She watches. We all turned in an instant, locking eyes face to face with a creature that could only be described as once possessing human qualities. It had limbs like that of a man, an old man. Its face was oval, probably because it had lost a lot of hair, as a few strands still lingered on the head. 5'4", and with a hunched back that seemed to pulsate like it was a living, breathing being of its own. A creation of Dr. Frankenstein's would be a beauty queen compared to this monster, yet it seemed to want to warn us about something. "Don't shoot it!" I yelled just before Steve could squeeze a few rounds into the creature. There was something about Steve that seemed deeper than just being a fossil collector. It was there, lurking behind his eyes, a bloodlust that seemed to pervade the already negative aura around him. "I don't take orders from you," he said with his gun still trained on the creature. "Well, you do if you want to get out of here alive," I said, turning to James for some backup. He just raised his hand, signaling Steve to back off. "What are you?" I asked, getting down to the heart of the situation as fast as I could. Whatever was watching us was bound to make an appearance sooner or later, and we needed all the information we could get. "I am you," it said with bulging-looking eyes. "How?" "We all were you," it said with an air of mystery that I wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean, we?" "Everything that's happened has happened before. It's destiny. Fate has brought you here. She watches." "Mate, we're not—" "Let it talk, please," I said, cutting Steve off. "Who watches?" "Andromeda. The one who shouldn't be seen," it said, causing a sick feeling to knot in my stomach. This should be good, I thought to myself sarcastically.
Andromeda? The galaxy or the Greek mythological princess?
Becky asked, curious as I was to know what we had gotten ourselves into. "Both," it said, darting its eyes around as if searching for something, or watching for something. "What is it?" James asked, speaking directly to the creature for the first time. "Leave now while you still can!" the creature screamed, just as an ear-splitting shriek pierced through the darkness, followed by a cacophony of wailing. "What the fuck? It's gone!" Steve yelled. "Get back to the ship!" I ordered. We darted for the entrance, which wasn't far ahead, but then stopped dead in our tracks a few strides into the sprint. Ahead of us stood a woman in a purple gown, knee-length, with a bluish metallic hue. She stood with her back to us, seeming to sob quietly to herself. The unreality quotient was increasing, but I knew this all to be true, as real as my beating heart, which at the moment seemed like it would burst out of my body, serving as its confines. Then she turned and gazed at Becky straight in the eyes, causing her to gag once and slump to the ground, dead. "Ah, shit!" Steve yelled as he squeezed off 2 rounds at the partly cyborg lady with jet black hair, but missed as she instantly faded into a dark cloud of smoke, vanishing before our eyes. Still in shock, I rushed towards Becky, but her face was drained of blood and her eyes bulged out, just like the creature we had seen earlier, before the lady appeared. "Oh God, she's dead," the handyman who had tagged along with Steve said, speaking for the first time. "Everybody fall back to the ship." This time it was Steve who said it. "We can't just leave her here," I said vehemently. "We can, and we're going to. If that body is infected or whatever the hell, we're done for." "We spent almost a year to get here, and you want to throw it all away because of a bloody casualty," James said with ease. A strange kind of ease. Suddenly, Steve pointed his gun directly at James. "What the fuck are you not telling us, old man?"
Are you mad?
James shouted.
Know your place, soldier.
Soldier. It all started to make sense.
I didn't sign up for this kind of spooky shit. You better start talking before I give the bitch in purple a little purple rain,
he said with probably more bravado than he felt.
"She watches!"
A voice, not that of the creature but of something else, said from behind Steve that very moment. As he turned, he was looking straight into the woman's eyes as she appeared directly in front of him. Slowly, he turned the gun on himself, blasting a bullet into his head. Fragments of blood and bone spewed into the air. Scattered droplets sprinkled on my face like dewdrops. The woman giggled and morphed into a cloud of dark smoke, immediately vanishing once more. One word crossed my mind with so much force I could feel a tug at my nerves. Run! What seemed to be hooves could be heard from behind, followed by a sob, a giggle, then utter silence. Whatever the being Andromeda was, it was distorted, disturbed, and vengeful. We arrived at the entrance to find Carlo, soaked in a pool of his own blood. His death was also from a gunshot wound to the head. The question I asked myself was this caused by the woman, or something else?
Don't gaze upon the one who shouldn't be seen.
The creature's voice came from behind a pile of debris, and it crept out towards us. "What the hell is going on?" I shrieked.
She wasn't always like this,
it said, almost thoughtfully, as if reminiscing about a time beforehand. I walked over to the being and grabbed it by the shoulders. It didn't even flinch, almost as if it had no fear, or fear found a home in it. "Quit throwing words to the wind. What is going on?"
Get out while you still can.
It giggled. "She watches." "Ah!" I yelled, letting go of its shoulder as it wriggled free and fled down a debris-filled pathway. "Let's get out of here," I said to James, who had suddenly fallen quiet.
"I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Twain.
"What?"
That being, woman, whatever she is, that's why we're here,"
he said with a straight face. "You knew about this?"
"I did. Miss Sanders did. Steve and his men knew a little of what was going on.
"What happened to carving a niche suitable for life?"
In a word, bullshit. A reason to get you to come. NASA and NATO agreed that you are the best man for the job. getting us here. In that cyborg is a nuclear reactor capable of powering a whole planet. The galaxy Andromeda is only another timeline similar to ours, but with different rules. She is the living, breathing soul of their existence. Like Gaia, if you will, but machine.
And you know all this? How? My mind was reeling with questions. Oh, come on. There's a lot they don't tell us. It's safer that way. So what is it going to be, Mr. Twain? He asked as he pulled out a gun. Another surprise in a night full of surprises. Are you going to make history with me, or are you going to be another one of its casualties? Suddenly, the creature pounced on James from behind, knocking him off his feet.
Run!
It said in a baritone of what was probably its original voice. Without waiting any further, I dashed upwards from the mouth of the cave.
Don't be like us. Don't let your greed feed off the life in your world.
It shrieked behind me. Truly, this has been the most adrenaline-packed time of my life, and I still couldn't place all that was going on. Suddenly, a shriek pierced through the cave, but I kept running. Hooves and wails could be heard in my wake, but I kept running. Don't you dare stop, I urged myself. An opening. Finally, I was close to the end of this nightmare. Bursting out into the clear, it was right there, a few yards away from me. The Exhumer was a ship shaped like a stealth jet, about the size of a Boeing plane. Running on solar energy, it had the capability of bringing us to Mars and back to Earth. I dashed for the jet, oblivious to the fact that James was just behind me, until he said, "They'll kill you," he said, bleeding, but the blood didn't look like his. "You're better off taking your chances with me, Mr. Twain," he added, raising his gun to level with my chest. My eyes widened in terror, not from the gun aimed at me, but from what I saw behind James. The creature had grown in size, and it seemed to be bleeding from its right eye. It looked like something mythical, yet wholly technological, as its legs were that of a cyborg, and its arms grew bigger, with fingers pushing out claws like that of a bear. It shrieked into the night sky, then immediately grabbed James by the legs, toppling him to the ground. The beast pulled the semiotician into the cave with it.
Don't come back,
it wailed as it went deeper into the cave.
She watches.
The sixth handyman who had stayed with the ship was dead by the time I got there. I had seen enough to last me a lifetime, and so I got in and prepped the ship for its return home. Earth. What was left of it. Voyaging for 300 days had a way of causing the mind to ponder on anything and everything. I had been lost in my own thoughts for days on end, only pausing for necessities while the ship ran on autopilot. Within this time, a call came through from NASA.
Exhumer, come in. Exhumer, come in.
The intercom on my dashboard buzzed. Exhumer here. Over. I replied after pressing the red button on the intercom. I was getting close to Earth now. They must have picked up my signal.
Please identify yourself. Over.
Static. Captain Stephen Twain here. Over. A pause. Static. Silence. Are you there? Over.
Who's there with you? Over.
Everyone's dead. A pause. Static. Silence.
Please hold.
Not like I was going anywhere at the moment, I thought.
New orders.
You are now in possession of classified information and must report back to Base Juniper Tree ASAP. Over.
Static.
Captain Twain, do you copy? Over.
You want to shut me out? You don't want the world to know, do you?
Captain Twain, you have your orders.
Well, I gave myself new ones, I said as I shut off the intercom and changed course, crashing the ship over the Atlantic, leaving nothing in my wake. Somewhere in Greenland, Earth. Is this thing on? If you're watching this, please listen. Whatever they tell you, don't go to Mars. Our world may be dying, but death waits all who journey there. I'm Captain Stephen Twain. I've been there. It's hell in the skies. Hey, Creepypasta fans. Thanks for listening. To connect with and support us, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon in the description. And remember, stay cosmic.
First, well, there were warning signs and reasons to be worried. Something went wrong with our spaceship. The engines had malfunctioned, resulting in a quick and aggressive loss of fuel. The system was acting up, and the repairs had to be done by hand. But the fuel wasn't being carelessly dropped into space. It was pooling around the flawed engines, heating up, and eventually exploding right in the face of our two onboard mechanics. The pain of the loss was equal to the terror of what was about to happen. Half the ship was on fire. I was the pilot. This tragic mission was in my hands, and I had to get my co-pilot back home safely. It was the least I could do. The adrenaline was rushing through my body. My heart was breaking. The alarms were threatening to split my skull in half, and my co-pilot was crying on the other seat. "Ashley, I don't want to die," she yelled. "Ashley, do something. Oh my God, they're dead. They're really dead. Ashley, we're going to die. Please do something. Please." I was trying my hardest. I was shaking all over, and her words were going to drive me insane. Because I knew she was right. This was hell. The whole thing was going to catch fire, and we would die an extremely painful death. I looked at our radar signals, desperately wishing for a miracle to come true. But there was nothing. We were alone in this cold and unforgiving corner of space. Or so we thought. The system had already failed me once today. I had no reason to rely on it, and my eyes couldn't lie. There was a planet, right there. I was seeing it myself. It wasn't a mirage, it was a miracle. If there was any chance to make it out of this burning mess alive, this was it. I cleared my throat and announced the bad news. "Patricia, get fucking ready and work with me here. We are going to perform an emergency landing on that planet ahead of us. This is life or death, okay? We'll unlatch our part of the ship and go on with the auxiliary engine. I'll get us through this, you understand? Get ready in 3, 2, 1. We pulled on our controls in perfect sync. The alarms blaring all over the ship doubled. The fire expanded. Our odds worsened. And we started to scream as if our skeletons were being ripped out of our bodies by the sudden tension inside our cabin. And then I couldn't breathe. I was seeing planet Earth right in front of me. It had been a fucking mirage all along. The blue waters, the mountains, the deserts, and the lush jungle coming closer and closer until the pressure of gravity drawing us in was enough to knock me out unconscious. I thought I was dead. I was so sure I had died. But, God, death isn't supposed to hurt this much, is it? My head is experiencing unimaginable pain. There's an awful pressure on my chest, and my lungs are on fire. Everything is painful, and I start to wish I was dying. But no. There's this incessant ringing in my ears that refuses to let me slip back into unconsciousness to never come up again. After another moment, it finally registers in my brain that what I'm hearing is an emergency alarm. It doesn't come from the ship anymore, but from inside my suit. I'm running out of oxygen. This sparks my flight or fight response. My body jerks fully into wakefulness and I snap up to a sitting position, gasping for a lungful of air, and end up choking on my own breath. There's something wrong. My throat burns, but the smell. This isn't oxygen coming from my suit. When my eyes finally adapt to the light, I become aware of a few things. 1, my helmet broke and I'm exposed to the air around me. 2, the air isn't killing me. There's perfectly good air for me to breathe wherever I am. And 3, everything around me is an unexplainable disaster. Just like my helmet, the front glass of the pilot's cabin is broken. But I can barely believe my eyes. The thing that broke the glass is a very tall tree that looks exactly like something out of planet Earth, but apparently 1,000 times stronger. Okay, this can't be happening. We were years away from Earth, but whatever this planet is, it's not my main concern at the moment. Patricia, my co-pilot, where the hell is she? I look around me desperately with my fears growing with every passing second. Oh God, but the moment I find her, I wish I hadn't. No, but Patricia? Oh God, this can't be real. Oh, this can't be happening. She was always so full of life. She was one of the best people I have ever met. This limp and lifeless body, this can't be hers. But, oh God, it is. No. She's right there, on the floor of the cabin, lying in a puddle of her own blood. I can't tell what killed her. The impact, the crash, her head hitting the floor and cracking open, or maybe the tree's branch impaled her through the heart first. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh. All of my physical pain fades into the background of this. Oh, this grief. My hands are shaking and I can't stop the tears from coming, but underneath this pain, there's a current of burning self-hatred. I failed. My mission was a disaster. The ship collapsed. I failed every member of my crew. My friends are dead. And I am all alone on this unexplainable planet. Why didn't it show up on our radars? Why didn't I even know it existed? I need someone to blame, and this planet will know all of my rage. Although my legs are shaking and I am most definitely not thinking clearly, I get out of the pilot's cabin and find one of the exit gates of what is left of the ship. It was surprisingly easy to open, considering it's half destroyed anyway. I stumble outside, shielding my eyes from the sudden light outside. I rack my brain looking for a possible source that could illuminate the planet this much. But I suspect some of it is a reaction to something in the atmosphere. I yank my helmet off my head and finally focus on the world around me. I can't believe it. This is nearly identical to a lush countryside on Earth. I could even remember hiking in similar places back home. The big pine trees, the green grass, a hill up ahead, even some kinds of insects flying around in the nearby distance. A small explosion distracts me, and I turn to look at half of the ship, abandoned half a mile behind me. It's burning like a fire straight from hell. Just as I'm starting to wonder if there's anything salvageable, fuck! Ooh! What is this? Sharp pain looms on my right leg, and I twist and turn, wincing and screaming. I look down, and there's an animal latched onto my leg. Oh, fuck. This is bad. This is so bad. Ow! Fuck. Whatever this is, it has teeth like blades piercing through my suit. God! Oh, my skin and my muscles. God! Fuck! Let me go! I yell, shaking my leg to the best of my ability. I look around, desperate, alone, at the very least hoping for a weapon, but I lose my balance. A terrible shriek comes out of the little extraterrestrial beast as we both tumble down heavily to the ground. Despite the pain, this does the trick. That small monstrosity lets go of my leg. I close my eyes and, curl up in a ball. Oh, this is a fucking nightmare. This is fear unlike anyone else has known. I'm completely alone on a strange planet. My crew is dead, my ship is destroyed, and an alien just tried to chew through my leg. I'm shaking, and my tears run faster now. After a minute, my breathing starts to slow down. After another minute, I take the risk of moving my arms off my head and taking a look around. Whatever that animal was, it's gone now. I sit on the miraculously soft grass to assess the damage. The creature resembled some kind of large rat, maybe a monkey, judging by the way it clung to my leg, but I am confident nothing on Earth is like it. There's a tear in the leg of the suit. There's blood oozing out of my wound. There's no doubt that I'm exposed and vulnerable. I have to return to my ship and figure out the next step in this hellish scenario. I can't believe this is actually happening. I try to look for the confidence of leadership instincts that got me the role of the pilot during training. but there's nothing. I'm hollowed out and broken. My heart is burnt, and my mind is crumbling down. Yeah, I am definitely a reflection of my ship. The moment I step back inside, the whole thing rattles around me, and I hear something crash down to the floor nearby. I get goosebumps thinking about the worst. Is it just the ship falling to pieces after that hard landing? Could it be something else? Is there another violent and indestructible beast lurking in these hallways close to me? Just hovering out of sight, slithering through the shadows, observing me with hungry eyes, and getting its fangs ready to strike me down. Come out! I call them out. Come out! Come out and end me now! My life is doomed and I know it. But nothing comes. And the silence is almost as terrifying. I can't, or don't, want to do much more than hastily tie a bandage around the wound on my leg. I'm limping, and I realize with a start that I would be easy prey for any sort of animal. But what is there to fight for? The only thing I can attempt is to send a distress signal out to space and collect as much data on the planet as possible. Maybe some ship will catch my signal. Maybe a rescue mission will find my crashed ship and the dead bodies of me and my crew. If I can compile enough information about this planet, then my research could let the rest of humanity know if we found a second home, or if nobody else should ever set foot on this planet. I don't care if I live or not. But this has to be the last thing I do if I'm going to die. Sending the distress signal is easy enough, or at least it should be. It's just a quick stop on the pilot's cabin, a couple of buttons, and praying it'll reach far enough for any other ship or space station to catch it. There are only two problems. One, the body of my loved co-pilot is still lying there cold and lifeless, waiting for me. Two, I decided to take the option to add a personal message along with the signal. At first, I fear I won't find the right words, and I'll choke on my fear and my grief. However, after the agonizing loneliness I felt since crashing on the surface of this planet, the chance to talk and share the heavy weight of the horrors I've seen, well, I let it all out. This is Ashley Mitchell, pilot of the Demios space vessel, sending out an emergency call. My ship experienced a grave malfunction, which resulted in the death of 2 members of the crew and a fire in the rear of the ship. My co-pilot and I performed an emergency landing on the nearest planet, but it wasn't a success. I'm the sole survivor of the mission. The planet is an unknown case. It wasn't picked up by our radars, and it presents Earth-like qualities. I repeat, the planet heavily resembles planet Earth. I will carry out the necessary tests to professionally evaluate the planet and leave the results for the benefit of the rest of humanity, but... God, please. Please send help. Please get me out of here. Jesus Christ, I can't explain how awful it is. They're all dead, and it wasn't easy or kind. It was cruel and vicious. Their lives were ripped away by a tragedy, and I'm here alone. Here carrying the burden. I'm in a nightmare. I don't know what the results will say, but this planet is a nightmare. It's Earth, but it isn't. It's hungry and dangerous and can't be trusted. I was attacked already, and if I'm lucky, I'll bleed out before something worse happens. End of the distress signal. So, in the end, I'm shaking in front of the controls and regretting half of my words. But they're all I have. There's no one here to talk things with. There's just me, and the last thing I can offer humanity. Answers. I make my way to the lab, which thankfully is close to the pilot's cabin. And this half of the ship is badly shaken, but at least safe from the fire. The small room is equipped with the best computers that technology can offer. But at the moment, I just need something simple. I thank the practicality of the system and grab a suitcase with everything I need. Then I step out of my damaged ship again. I open the suitcase on the ground and a few steps away from the ship. The tests I have to run are very simple and don't even require a lot of work on my part. There's only a few questions I'm supposed to answer. Is this planet lethal for human beings? Yes or no? Is the atmosphere appropriate? Can we breathe this air? Is the ground fertile? Is there fresh water present? I could be breathing easily right now, but unbeknownst to me, this air could be poisoning my lungs and destroying my body from the inside out with each passing second I spend here. Good. Let this hell consume me like it took my crew away from me. From the suitcase, I prepare and activate 2 devices that I stick securely on the soil at my feet. The shorter one will analyze the ground of the planet, and the tall, standing one, about half my height, will study the quality of the air. There's only 1 step left, and I consider giving up before starting. But according to the remaining device, there really is a source of water nearby. And guilt and responsibility fill me up to convince me to walk all the way there to run the last test necessary. The ship crashed in a clearing of a green area that looked like a jungle. It made me think of the Amazon rainforest, actually, which meant that one of these great trees took the life of my co-pilot. But it also means there is a river nearby. I start walking west, and before 5 minutes, I'm able to hear the murmur of the water flowing wildly. My leg is throbbing in the place where the alien animal bit me, but other than the limping a little, I managed to walk all the way to the river. If I wasn't scared out of my mind and carrying a lot of grief with me, I would have thought the place was beautiful, if a little unsettling. It's familiar but strange. It looks like a spot from Earth, but just wrong enough to make me feel unsafe. The wood of the tree trunks is the wrong shade of brown. The water moves oddly slow, and it isn't crystal clear. It's nearly a solid blue color, yet very loud. I look around in search of a wild animal I should be aware of, but find nothing too concerning. Still, I prefer not to dip my hand in those sluggish waters. Thankfully for me, the device comes with a small hose, about 2 meters long, that I can unlatch from the device, throw at the water, and wait for the system to run the test. It's quite simple. I walk as close to the river as possible, get the hose ready, and I throw it at the water like a rope. The consequences are immediate. The water tugs at the hose so fiercely that it yanks the device straight from my hands. It clatters to the ground, and I don't have time to consider picking it up before the depths of the water give it another tug and absorb the device entirely. I gasp loudly. If I had hesitated, if I held the device a little tighter, then that mysterious force would have dragged me down in the blink of an eye. What the hell is this? It's like half a dozen men were hiding under the surface of the water. They using all their force to drag into the water anything that comes too close. I was definitely too close. Before I start running away, there's a splash. I can barely believe my eyes, as if it were a fish jumping out of the surface. The water defies my sense of gravity and the laws of physics I'm aware of, and sends a splash out of the river and onto the muddy earth on the side. It falls heavily. This isn't water at all. This is a gooey, bluish substance that splatters on the ground like gelatin. It happens again and again. I become acutely aware that it's coming closer and closer. It's coming for me. I start running, but the river becomes faster. I feel a splash land on my leg, and the impact throws me off balance. It looks like a dead jellyfish stuck to my leg. But I don't feel pain or a pull to the river yet, so I ignore the next splashes that land on my thighs, and I drag my body through the mud. I'm heaving by the time I reach the clearing again, and I pull myself to my feet. It takes me a few attempts because the ground is so slippery. I don't get it at first, but then I realize it wasn't like this when I last passed this area. Something has changed. Oh God, my mind is a mess, and it takes me a while to make sense of it. Did it rain while I was by the river? Why is the ground so muddy now? My eyes skim the area ahead of me until they land on the devices I left running. Or at least one of them. I can't see the shorter one. It must have sunk in the mud. I have a bad feeling about this. But I mean, I'm literally on a planet I know nothing about. I have literally nothing to compare this situation to. I have no way to know how bad this is. The only thing I can do is limp my way over to the device still stuck on the ground. The remaining device barely reaches my knee, so it sank about halfway through. This is concerning. My only relief is seeing the result displayed on the little screen. The air here is completely safe for humans. That is slightly shocking, but definitely welcomed good news. Although they're aggressively overshadowed by what happened next. First, a horrible sound. A deafening thunder coming from far underneath me. Then, a huge tremor on the ground. I thought it was an earthquake. And I thought my luck was bad enough to have crashed on a planet right during an earthquake. But no, that isn't exactly it. The mud at my feet rumbles and shakes, not like a rock splitting in half, but like the waves of the ocean during a storm. Everything turns unsteady, and from the mud comes a fetid smell that makes me gag. The still shaking ground makes me lose my balance, and I fall down to my knees. Then, I watch in horror as my hands disappear into the mud below me. I scream and yank them back quickly. I don't have time to notice the way my knees are also sinking. My attention is stolen by a new sound. It's the sound of metal being crushed under great pressure. My spaceship is getting dragged underground by an invisible force. Seeing an entire spaceship sinking down slowly into muddy soil is a staggering sight. There's no power, no strength, nothing that human resources can do to defy these horrifying forces in action on this planet. All my senses tell me to do one thing and one thing only. Run. Run away now. I completely ignore every rational part of my brain and drag myself up with every intention of making my way back inside my ship. Patricia! I yell at the top of my lungs as if her corpse could still hear me, as if my co-pilot could come back from the dead and reach out to me and get me out of this deadly trap. Patricia! I yell again, pushing through the rapidly rising mud. The last thing I deserve is to die by her side. To die by my ship. To sink and drown in the ship that I crashed. But fate and justice abandoned me the second I landed on this godforsaken planet. In an instant, moving becomes too hard. But I'm not just stuck. Something latched onto my leg. I try to push through, but it's hopeless. So I finally look down, and my brain barely comprehends what I see. No, this can't be happening. Let me go. Is this a vine? It looks like some sort of climbing planet rising from the mud and wrapping around my leg. Oh, what the fuck? No! I grunt with effort, but when I try to pull my leg away, I only end up falling on the mud. And I immediately start to feel sick. No, fuck this. This is too much. Let me go. Patricia? Anyone? Fuck! Now what? When I manage to pull myself up to my feet again, I scream at the sight of my hands. Ah! When I touched the mud, about a dozen insects took the opportunity to climb on top of me. Holy shit, they're like giant beetles so big that, I could feel the weight dragging me down. Get away from me! I shake my arms wildly, lose my balance again, and when I fall, I realize with a terrible shock that I could no longer feel my legs. Oh, Jesus Christ. This is the end for me, isn't it? The bugs don't wait for my death to start biting. They tear through my suit. They sneak in. And they burrow themselves in my skin. The pain makes a scream explode out of me. And even that small release is taken from me. The vines snap out of the mud again and wrap around my head, covering my mouth and making me gag. I shake and struggle to breathe. I don't know what is crushing my lungs, if the pressure of the mud, the vines, or the bugs eating me alive. I can't scream. I can't move. The mud is up to my chest now. Even though I can't move my limbs, I still feel the hungry bugs taking out one bite at a time, with the vines tightly wrapped around my head and my neck. I can't breathe anymore. I barely feel my tears slide down my cheeks as the mud reaches my chin. All I can do is stare at my spaceship, shattered and crumbled, and sinking down even faster than I am. It was all a disaster. I didn't even leave the tests behind. What is this abominable planet?
She strapped the baby tighter to her chest. She could hear animal footsteps approaching behind her. This had to be the place. The Razek. Personal, elite guards of the king had been sent after her, ordered to kill her on sight and retrieve the baby. May the gods protect you, my child. A spring of tears gushed from her eyes and strolled down her cheeks. She brought out an amber gemstone. It shone with grace and cast a bright yellow hue around the entire place. The amber stone was covered in blood. If not for her unique abilities, she should be dead. She raised her head towards the heavens. This may be the last time she would see the beauty, the deep blue sky, and the majestic floating rocks, strolling proudly in the sky. Her dark brown eyes, searching for solace despite the chaos. Large beads of sweat and blood trickled down her beautiful face as her russet brown skin glittered under the moonlight. She ran her fingers through her long and dark braided hair before whispering a few words, causing a marble rock to rise from the earth in front of her. She set the baby down calmly upon the rock, plunged the amber stone deep into the side of the rock, and placed one last kiss. As the rock descended into the ground, so did her head, sliced off by one of the Razak. Blood splattered around the place, but in her last moments, she would be grateful for one thing. Her child was gone, far beyond their reach. I have always dreamt of taking a trip to Paris for a vacation. Some call her the City of Lights, or the fashion capital. but I chose to call her the City of Love. What better way to tour this city of indescribable beauty than with my heartmate, the woman whose smile makes my heart beat faster. Kate and I will be tying the knot in a few weeks. I couldn't wait to become one with my best friends. 10 years have passed since we danced together in high school, and our love has not aged a single day. I stood on the balcony of the famed Hotel de la Montpiquet, admiring the beauty of such a wonderful place. The stars in the sky shone with confidence as the scent of different French cuisines invaded my nostrils. It had been a long flight from Sunderland. I needed some rest. Henry, get back in bed. It's cold outside. Kate is the most beautiful woman I've ever met. She looked like an angel from another world. I was indeed the luckiest man on earth to have met her. She had natural deep blue eyes that shone against her ebony skin. That was a rare type of beauty. She caught me staring at her and adjusted her red silk nightdress, revealing the smoothness of her perfect and spotless thighs. Whenever she looked at me, I felt a surge of electricity coursing through my body. I strolled to the bed and lay beside her. This is going to be a long night. Henry, don't forget that we have ice skating in the morning. She laughed. Skating can always wait. I ran my hands down her thighs and hugged her from behind as she chucked loudly. It was going to be a long night indeed. Henry, wake up! That was my early morning alarm. My eyes shot open. It was Kate. She was already dressed up for skating. I grumbled under my breath and jumped out of bed. It had been an adventurous night, but the fun was just beginning. We grabbed our skating shoes and rushed out of the hotel. The winter cold had reached its apex. We could spot the famous Tour Eiffel in the distance despite the heavy snow. That was our destination. One of the most well-known ice skating spots in Paris was situated right in front of the Eiffel Tower. I could see the ecstasy on Kate's face as we strolled further toward the site. Tourists moved around the entire city of Paris, stopping at intervals to take photographs or grab a French snack. It was a few days to Christmas, and the entire city was alive. Beautiful lights illuminated the streets. Couples laughed and danced to different Christmas songs. It was a wonderful and memorable sight. You hungry? I smiled at Kate. No, Henry, let's skate first. Yes, my lady. We soon arrived at our destination, strapped on our skating shoes, and jumped on the ice, skating and dancing along to various beautiful songs. The cold air howled loudly, causing Kate's long braided hair to dance too. Henry, what's that sound? What sound? I asked curiously, glancing around. I can hear my name. Someone's calling me. Kate, what are you talking about? I was beginning to get uneasy with a concerned look on her face. She looked behind her as if she was attempting to answer a call when she lost her footing. She spun around for a moment before crashing into a small chunk of ice, massed under a pile of snow. Kate! I yelled and rushed towards her. You're bleeding, Kate. I need to get you to the hospital right now. She had hit her head on the ice. It's nothing, Henry, she said as she raised her head from the ice. A blinding light illuminated the entire place. Something was trapped under the chunk of ice. I instantly grabbed the lunk of ice and smashed it continuously in the snow, until an amber gemstone dropped out of it. Kate suddenly jerked back in shock. I've seen this gem many times in my dream. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I would have thought she was trying to be poetic, if not for the perplexed look on her face. I slipped the gemstone gently into my right pocket. Come on, we need to get you back to the hotel. The day had taken an unexpected turn, and I was longing to know why what seemed like a coincidence was slowly becoming an intentional event. As I guided Kate back to the hotel, I felt as though someone was watching us. Something was not right about the new atmosphere. I could hear the soft cries of crickets in the distance as I lifted the amber gemstone into the air. Kate emerged from the bathroom and sat next to me on the bed. This is the only memory I have of my roots. I've had many dreams since I was a kid about this gemstone. I never knew why or what it meant, so I guess that it was just a dream, but this changes everything. Kate, look. I pointed at the wall. The amber stone spread the dim sunlight that passed through it, casting an orange reflection on the wall. A small dot appeared on the reflection, Maybe it is pointing us to something, I thought. There's something written on it. Kate, look. It doesn't look English, does it? Quick. Kate, come take a photo. Kate. Kate? Kate strolled towards the light as though she was caught in a trance. I brought out my iPhone and took a quick shot of the reflection on the wall, watching her closely as I did. She placed her hands on the wall and began to read out loud. Through sweat and blood you'll find a path. The moon and the star will speak my words. Through fire and ice you'll evade the wrath. Listen to the song of the thunderbirds. How can you read this, Kate? What language is this? I don't know. Kate stammered. I don't know what is going on, Henry. I just feel like it's trying to tell me something. I don't know. Henry, I don't know. Several memories flooded Kate's thoughts and she began to sob softly. She had told me about her rough past. Hey, it's alright. We'll get through this together. I whispered in her ears as I wrapped her in my arms. Do you have any idea what the poem means? I asked curiously, trying to stay calm and not to let her know how worried I actually was. She never got to answer my question. Something dropped with a loud thud behind us. We both turned in shock. Nothing. I exchanged glances with Kate. We were still trying to figure out what was happening when the light in the room suddenly went off. Kate hugged me tightly, trembling in fear. I put the gem back in my pocket and ran towards the door when an arrow wheezed past my left ear. What the hell? I yelled. I raised my head above my shoulder and sighted someone standing behind us. I couldn't pick out who or what it was because the lights were off. Kate turned the doorknob and we both rushed out. We bumped into another strange man who was rushing towards our room. He had a mask on.
Follow me,
he yelled. He held our hands and whispered a few words, causing a blinding light to descend on us. Our attacker darted out of the room, as if sensing the new presence. But he was a bit too late. We were gone in a zap. My head was spinning badly. Kate was still with me. At least I had that. So I managed to stay calm. The light from the crescent moon, which stared at us from above, and the calm and clear dark blue sky indicated that it was night. We were definitely not in Paris anymore. The sea of sand and the dusty air. We were in a desert. Who are you? Where are we? I glanced at my watch and the time read 1:45 p.m. That was the time in Paris just a moment ago. So we were most likely in another time zone.
We don't have much time. He'll soon discover we are here. Where is the stone?
The masked man had a husky voice. He spoke with increasing urgency. I had to obey. I pulled out the stone and handed it over to him.
Raise it towards the moon.
The moon and the star will speak my words. The poem must have been some sort of guide. I lifted the amber gemstone towards the sky. It glowed brightly as the light from the moon began to concentrate on the stone, casting to the ground another reflection, similar to the one we had seen earlier in the hotel. A day will come when the veil is torn between both worlds for your return. A day will come when the last firstborn of pure blood shall rise up, reborn. A sudden wave of energy exploded throughout the entire place as a whirlwind began to form in the distance. I think it's a map! Look! The dot is blinking! I think that's us, and there's another dot! I think we have to follow it. Kate didn't stop for a minute to think about what she was doing. The map was pointing towards the whirlwind, and she began to run towards it. Kate, wait! We don't even know what's going on yet! Another loud bang erupted in front of us, as Kate suddenly let out a dying scream and fell to the ground. Our attacker from the hotel was back, but this time, he was not alone. Two wolf-like creatures stood with him on both sides, and they looked like nothing I have ever seen before. Something crazy was happening, and I was lost in all of it. Our beautiful vacation had suddenly turned into a series of confusing events. The man wore a black hood and was covered in thick darkness, which made it difficult to pick out his form. I rushed towards Kate and held her in my arms.
Follow the map! Go! I'll take care of this!
The masked man yelled. Everything was happening too fast, and I had no clue about what was going on, but if Kate was okay, then I was willing to push on.
Go!
The masked man yelled again, before lunging toward our attacker. I grabbed Kate's hand and we both made it towards the whirlwind. We had barely reached the whirlwind when a blinding light filled the whole place, lit by the amber gemstone in my hands. The ground beneath us gave way, and we began to descend into the blackness of an abyss. A day will come when the veil is torn between both worlds for your return. My eyes shot open. Kate was just waking up too. You hurt? I asked calmly. No, just my head. Where is this place? Are we still on Earth? My head was pounding and spinning as I made my way towards the cliff of the mountain where we had awoken. My jaws dropped as I scanned our environment. Oh my God! Kate let out. Floating rocks traveled below the dark blue sky. Buildings stood high, stretching towards the sky. I felt much heavier than normal. Colors never seen before pulsated everywhere before us. Creatures beyond our mind's recognition strolled about the vast lands and air. Flying airships and mind-blowing transport pods filled the sky. This was definitely not our world anymore. Could this be another civilization? They had an extraordinary level of technological advancement, and we were so captivated by the stunning reality that was unfolding before us that I failed to notice the massive bird-like creatures flying toward us with unreal speeds. Kate! Duck! There were men seated on the large birds. They had ebony skin, just like Kate. Several tattoos were scattered all over their bodies, and they wore the same kind of armor. It seemed like some sort of nanotechnology, and it moved in synchrony with their body movement. This was science at its peak. The men had a weird rocky physique. Although they shared a similar appearance with normal human beings, their hands and feet seemed much larger than an average man, and they were all much taller. Suddenly, one of the birds flew past us and snatched Kate from the ground. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do, but I pursued the bird and grabbed onto its feathers as it drifted off the cliff. I could hear Kate's muffled screams for help as she hung from the claws of one of the birds. A familiar figure suddenly appeared in the sky and landed on the back of the bird I was hanging onto. It was the masked man, but he seemed to be bleeding. Everything was spinning out of control, and the ferocious breeze slapped continuously against my languid face. My head appeared as though it had its own heartbeat, but I didn't care anyway. My dearest Kate was in danger, and I would do anything to keep her safe. Help! I called out to the masked man. Sparks of light lit up the dark blue sky as he engaged in combat with the man on the bird. They looked to be fighting with some sort of laser weapon. I was slowly losing grip of the feather, and the masked man didn't seem to be winning his fight either. The bird suddenly made a sharp swerve around a floating rock, throwing me off its feathers and into the air. I was descending fast. Was this the end? I thought. Everything below me looked blurry as I spun in the air. I could hear Kate scream my name as the large bird carried her towards the distant mountains. My mind was already racing around several possibilities when someone grabbed me from behind in midair. He was hovering on a transparent device. It was the masked man. He had saved us several times, and now I needed to know who he was. Who are you? I asked, still trying to catch my breath, but the man remained quiet. We soon reached the ground and landed safely. I know you can hear me, and you can speak my language. I don't know what is going on and where the hell I even am. But listen, Kate is my life. I can't afford to lose her. Please, just please. Tell me what is going on. I was desperate, and the masked man could sense it. I would never forgive myself if anything happened to Kate. Come with me. The masked man finally took off his mask, revealing his face. The ebony face, the deep blue eyes, and the dark braided hair. No, I'm not her father, judging by that look on your face. My name is Ricard. You must have guessed what I was thinking. But I knew her parents. Yes, she is from our worlds. Earth, not yours. I always knew there was something different about Kate, but wow, not this kind. We strolled into a settlement. There was something off about this new place. The people looked sick and most parts of their bodies seemed to be decaying. Unlike the advanced city I'd just seen, this place looked like the complete opposite. Where is this place? How did you know we're parents? Her father was a great and just king. He was wise and had knowledge about the stars and the worlds beyond. He taught me most of what I know. Rakad began. I served as his right-hand guard before this plague started. You are still on planet Earth, just a different plane and dimension. This place is called Hollow Earth, and it is probably 1/10 lesser in size than the Earth. Only a few of our people know about your worlds. My king was a creator. He discovered most of the technology you see in our world today, including the Great Sphere. The sphere is a highly complex biological technology. It could modify our genes, birthing several advanced abilities. He experimented on the people. For some, it works, earning them the name Purebloods. But the sphere, however, was not effective for everyone. My king's brother was one of the unfortunate ones. The sphere began to corrupt some of our people like a disease, and despite all of his efforts to find a cure, the only thing that seemed to give a temporary cure was the blood of those who had not been affected. The Purebloods. His brother soon grew mad with hate, killed my king, and seized the throne which he still seats on today. Rakad continued to narrate his tale as we strolled past a few of the people who were corrupted by the plague. They seemed weak and helpless. Rakad was heading towards a large war aircraft. Dozens of men, prepared for combat, awaited him in front of the aircraft. Okay, I'm sorry. What role does Kate play in all of this? What are you planning to do? The people are tired. A permanent cure was discovered soon after my king's death, but it came at a heavy price. The blood of the royal purebloods was discovered to permanently cure the plague. Most of them agreed to help eradicate the plague, but the king had other plans. Rakad started. Oh, so why isn't everyone cured yet? I interrupted. Well, the king is cured. He wanted to retain power, so he hunted down the purebloods and forced them to hide in the shadows. Kate's mother, the queen, was the last pureblood to be killed, but that was just after she sent Kate into your realm, away from the king. He sends out just enough of the cure to keep those affected temporarily healed, but the poor cannot afford it, and so they are banished from the kingdom and left to die out here. Kate is the last royal pureblood, and a prophecy was told of her return, the day when the veil is torn between both worlds. I have awaited this day, but so has the king. The man I fought in your world is the king's emissary. He was sent to retrieve the princess from your worlds. What? Is he dead? My heart was racing as I listened to Rakad's tale. From the sounds of it, Kate was in grave danger. I'm afraid not, Rakad softly replied. If he kills the princess, then all hope is lost. The king knows that if the people are permanently cured, he would no longer pose as a god. The entire kingdom will rise up against him. But as long as he holds the cure, he is untouchable. The purebloods would have loved to help when they were alive, but a cure can only be created by the sphere, and it's in the king's holds. We have friends inside the castle. We must save the princess at all cost. It's now or never. I nodded in agreement. It's not like I had much of a choice anyways. A few hours ago, I was having the best of fun in one of the most exquisite hotels in all of France. But right now, I was staring face to face with a revolution in another world, in another dimension. This was crazy, but it felt too real to be a dream. I jumped on the aircraft and Rakad gave me a small ball.
Somebody!
Place it on your chest.
Help!
I collected the device and did as he said. The ball let out a small pulse and began to wrap me in some sort of armor up to my neck region. I could feel the aircraft rise into the air and blast away. I couldn't believe I was actually marching into war. The invasion of the castle began from the inside. The Razek were the most lethal force in all of Hollow Earth, and they were protecting the king at all cost. We'd infiltrated the castle, and war had broken out. I could hear the cries of several men outside the castle, followed by loud explosions which made the ground tremble. "I need to find Cade!" I shouted to Ricard, amongst the chaos that surrounded us. "Follow me! He must have begun the experiment. I know where he will be." We made our way past several passages, and Ricard took down several guards on our way. Ricard served as the right-hand guard of Kate's father, so he knew the secret room where the king would most likely carry out the experiment. We soon reached the door and stormed in. "Henry!" Kate's voice echoed throughout the empty room. Kate was bound on a chair beside the king, who was surrounded by over a dozen of his Razek. The Great Sphere was much larger than I had envisioned. It was a massive, technological masterpiece of almost 15 feet. "Let her go!" I declared angrily. The king didn't seem threatened by our presence. There was something obviously much larger than we had thought going on. A large portal suddenly appeared in front of us, followed by a loud explosion. The king had just blown up the sphere. Several of our men joined us in the room, but the Razek were also unfazed. One of the Razek aimed his weapon at Kate. Ricard and I instantly sprung into motion, heading towards Kate. The Razek suddenly switched his aim towards me and cracked a shot as I came crashing down to the ground, groaning in pain. "Henry!" Kate screamed at the top of her lungs. I was beginning to lose consciousness. Was I dying? I could hear my heartbeat slow down. The king stopped short, shot a glance at me before walking through the portal. Ricard took down the Razek and freed Kate immediately. "We were fools," Ricard whispered. "He had bigger plans than all of this. He is gone to Earth." "Henry, no. Please don't leave me. Someone! Help! Anybody!" Kate drenched my armor with her tears. Several men gathered around me, lifting me on their shoulders, and carried me quickly out of the room. Darkness soon began to flood my entire being, leaving me no choice but to succumb to unconsciousness.
We weren't even born as a species. We weren't even a glimmer in evolution's eyes. We were simply non-existent. Yet, they thrived as one of the biggest and grandest civilizations in the universe. If not also one of the youngest. Oldest from our perspective, actually. It took them close to 35 million years to reach our galaxy and solar system from their own. So, you can imagine their surprise when they realized that there were other life forms out there. The reason why we called the discovery our own was because we had spotted them inadvertently when we were mapping out the brightest galaxies, some 3 centuries before their arrival. We didn't know what we were looking at back then, and that they weren't even looking. It was a funny story, and it sounded like it could have been the perfect intergalactic meet-cute. Until they actually got here. They appeared in our skies as gods would, distant, superior, and unimaginably powerful. On the way here, they had evolved, changed, mutated, and persevered so much more than can ever be described from our minuscule earthling perspective. Everything that they had achieved in their generational spaceship convoy on a technological level cannot be understated either. The complexity of their technology made calling it magic the most appropriate thing. Whatever had been left from their base civilization was completely unknown to them when they arrived here, and even less of it can be known to us. Ever. They had created not one, but hundreds of thousands of spacefaring, spaceborne civilizations that had risen and fallen right on the main spaceship, and spawned its many satellite ships over time. The guiding vessel, or the main ship, which we can only presume was the first, if the first was ever even preserved, held only the highest-ranking officials and royals. Its name, as much as we would eventually translate it, was the ground I walk on. None of them remembered why they left their home. So our biggest guest came from calculations our scientists made long ago. The consensus among the scientific community was that their sun had collapsed upon itself, rendering their homeworld uninhabitable. However, the extraterrestrials seemed generally uninterested in the place they came from. They behaved as if they had always been on those vessels, as if their many feet had never been pulled down by gravity that wasn't artificial. And, in a way, that was true. When we asked them if they had made any colonies along the way, considering the technologies they possessed and the many potential life-bearing planets they had passed, they could not wrap their minds around it. In fact, most of the royals referred to themselves as spaceborne, as if it were some kind of status symbol within their current societal structure. All of this information was something that we weren't cognizant of in the beginning, as you may already know. It took centuries under their dominance and guidance for us to finally be able to understand fragments of their language and history. This is why I'm recording this story for you, Bobo, so that you too can know of them, and so that you don't resent them. But mostly, I want you to understand what your big sis did for you, Bobo, so that you don't hate me anymore either. What had started as an innocent mission of peace a few centuries ago, led by others like Grandfather, had turned into something much more important. Before him, and later also me, none had stepped on the great vessel that led the convoy. While our predecessors were granted only access to the satellite ships, Grandfather and I were the only two humans that had ever boarded the main ship in the centuries since their arrival, and the only two that had ever laid eyes on the spaceborne. I was always aware of how you down there called us, and the others that ascended before us. I couldn't blame you for it. From your perspective, we were collaborators. However, I and all those before me saw ourselves as your champions. My first day on board the main ship was blanketed by so much overwhelm that I can barely remember it as I do any other day of my life. I'm not even sure how I even got them to notice me and take me on board their most treasured vessel. To even perceive what was around me took me quite some time. Then, the advance to understand what I began to perceive was aided by Grandfather, who had been there for the better part of at least 5 decades, possibly even more. Clad in an all-white gown, with the air of holy wisdom around him, he was more than glad to have another of his own join him in his mission. Grandfather had almost lost hope that those of us left on the surface of Earth could still see the glory and importance of our cosmic visitors turned saviors. His days were numbered as a human, and I was to take his place as ambassador. My work would allow me knowledge beyond the scope of the human mind that I, for now, still possess, and will, until I as well am replaced. However, that cycle will not continue forever. Once the last living human is incorporated within the body of the saviors, there will be no need for ambassadors. It is then, Bobo, when you will have realized that you never had any alternatives. This cosmic convoy will be joined with humanity. It remains your choice whether you will accept the loving embrace of the spaceborne, or be culled like cattle. My task as ambassador is to advise you to decide upon the former. My wish as your sister is for you to choose it gladly. What I now think was the first year on board the ground I walk on was the first year of my new life. Nothing can compare to it, Bobo. Not even giving birth to my first, and not even giving birth to my second daughter. Grandfather had often recalled his beginnings on the ship, and he would often compare his initial hardships to my current privilege of having someone guide me on the road already taken by him. He didn't have the advantage of shared language, and certainly not the advantage of being treated as a living being with biological and psychological needs. The spaceborne were unaware that he needed food to sustain his body, and even less that he needed companionship to sustain his mind. By his description, he was more of a pet and a plaything to them than he was ever an equal being. It took him getting dangerously ill for the spaceborne to realize that if he were to live, they would have to take care of him properly. The accounts of others that had lived and died on the satellite ships show a much different picture about the treatment they got there, and that had its own reasons. Whatever changes that had happened on a grander scale among the extraterrestrials, they happened on the main ship. However, the other changes, the lesser ones, the painful ones that needed more blood and sweat to be overcome, those changes were strictly kept within the boundaries of the satellites. This is why the ambassadors that had ascended to those ships were treated as fleshy beings that hurt and die. The spaceborne had no notion of these things. The ground I walk on was stripped from disease eons ago, and there is very little account of how the old beings who lived on that ship truly are. I am certain that they do perish eventually, if anything by their own hand, but they are as indifferent to it as you or I are indifferent to breathing. This might make them seem cruel and even brutal at times. I know, but that is simply a problem of method, not a problem of intent. Evil wants to hurt, Bobo. However, they simply have no conception of that. Not anymore, and surely not for a very long time. Can you even fathom the time span it took them to arrive close to our little speck of dust in the vast universe? I dare not imagine that the consequences of longevity are those, for how could I ever wish that for myself? For you, and for all. I battled with these questions since I became aware of them, and made my peace by choosing an answer. This is why I willingly remain among the spaceborne as an ambassador. The satellites were of a completely different nature. As much as I could learn from grandfather's unreliable stories, those ships were the ships of dynamic change, or as one might also see them, the spacefaring labs, primarily designed for physiological and psychological experimentation. However, you shouldn't fear the satellites, Bobo. Only the first culls of Earth were brought there, and they represent the price paid for what the likes of you would be able to enjoy once you joined the convoy. Prodding and dissecting should not be an eventuality of your future, for the change that would come to those that would board the vessel now would be much less painful, though still very dramatic. The experiences of the first culls should be to you as grandfather's experiences are to me. However, I, myself, will remain a being in between, since my mind cannot be, by all means, complete. For if I am able to remain capable of communication and of humanity, I shall not be fully integrated into the body of the extraterrestrials. Unlike those of you that are yet to board, once my purpose has been fulfilled, I shall be left to continue changing until I resemble nothing capable of speech. This is when I shall be replaced. In the 5th year of my current life, as I stepped on the ground I walk on, I first began to notice these changes within me. Subtle at first, but as time went on, and as I was more integrated with the lives of the spaceborne in the ship, the changes began to show all the more. If I were to come back to the Earth and gaze into your eyes, in this instant, you would not know it as your big sister standing before you, but another, wholly other. This is the gift that I had to receive upon ascending, and the gift that was withheld from grandfather. Each step might be a step upward. However, it is also a leap into darkness. The details of the step are gruesome and entail much suffering, especially for human sensibilities. But I assure you, my dear brother, once it is taken, there is no more need for the same sentiment. The extraterrestrials that live out their lives on the satellite ships are far different from the spaceborne. I am convinced that most of them had never been allowed passage on the main ship, simply because they had once been creatures that had lived full lives upon other planets. Yes, Bobo, there is other intelligent life in the universe, apart from our godlike visitors. Or should I say, there was much more of it, before they had stumbled upon it during their long journey. It took me quite some time to understand this, even though Grandfather had told me much about it ever since I had arrived on the ship. The spaceborne had become so accustomed to the genetic changes added to their own form, the many life forms they had assimilated, that they do not even see those as life forms, separated from themselves. If the extraterrestrials that left their homeworld some 35 million years ago were once one race, what they have become over time, through the mastery of genetic engineering and artificially induced evolution, is a container of the many codes of life. This should also account for their hideous appearance, the appearance that at first terrified and disgusted me beyond measure, has now become the only representation of beauty in this vast and cold universe. To be in the company of a spaceborne is to be in the company not of a monster, but that of a work of art. Each of them is a unique and complex masterpiece, where each stroke of the brush is taken from the endless genetic pool gathered along the way. Some of them may have tentacles, others no appendages at all, and some even walk on 2 feet. None, though, is the same as the other. Yet they are all still one, with one language, and with a structured society. Has this spelled out the idea of how they were able to survive for so long, Bobo? Can you now imagine humanity surviving together with them? The current structure of the human flesh and consciousness are merely limitations to existing in the universe. Within the convoy, we would be forever, or until there are no more living things left to cull. For one must wonder what fuels the perpetual life of the extraterrestrials. They do not procreate and feed by natural means, for their entire existence derives from the artifice of mixing and matching those properties of the living that they find useful, or sometimes simply interesting. Fortunately, the byproduct of their way of being is in the conservation of the make and properties of the ones they assimilate, in one way or another. While I would agree that there is a kind of brutality in that way of being, the argument would come from the side of me that still conforms to some kind of human nature. I have already seen and experienced so many things on this vessel that seeing life in the way I had seen it before seems like a step backwards. These extraterrestrials were once like us, I must believe. As proof, I shall mention simply the many iterations of civilized society that they had shifted through over the millions of years spent in the vacuum of space, surrounded by only themselves. They are not too keen on keeping historical records, ever since a malfunction caused their ship to wipe all of the accounts they once had of their homeworld and of their journey up to that point. As little of it that some of them remember, that was a time of darkness and uncertainty, where all of their worst characteristics surfaced as they wandered aimlessly. Others of the spaceborne interpret the malfunction as the moment they became what they are now, as if the slate was wiped clean, and they were able to truly introduce their new ideas into their old ways. It is telling that those who speak of the time with reverence are the ones who have noted it as an important historical moment in their becoming. It is also a question of how the brutality of the survival in those moments that caused the malfunction had further influenced who they are now. Imagine being on this spaceship some 20 million years ago. This was about the time of the Great Darkness. As sustainable as they had made their vessel, it took one small snag to render it incapable of being a home. I might never know exactly what happened, but I can guess. Little was left of their race after that incident. And it's a question of how much of the original ship was left as well. Whatever the extraterrestrials from 35 million light years away had done to survive, it sure wasn't civilized. Before the gods that they are now, they must have been vile and pathetic little creatures to endure the cold, empty void of space. This is a true testament to the power of change and their current iteration as a species. One can only pray they remain as loving and as soft as they are at the moment. For if they are again to fall from grace, no one can help us, or anyone else in the universe. It is better to become a property of their fashion than to be an enemy of their existence. All the suffering endured once the changes have been initiated must be justified once the integration is complete. This is why I would rather choose total assimilation over total and unambiguous annihilation. I am now in what is to be my 10th year on board. Grandfather had died a few years back, and his body was left to mummify in one of the endless halls of the ground I walk on, almost perfectly preserved. He is the one and only monument of death on this eternal vessel. For the spaceborne, he might as well be a piece of lint, for they do not even perceive what is left of him. For me, his corpse is the one and only proof that I too was once human. The changes that I am going through have slowed down until a replacement is found, or at least until the rest of you yield under the conditioning done to you on the surface of Earth, and the last culling had been concluded. I wish I could say that I miss what once made my own flesh and blood. Eyes, arms, even hair. I wish that I missed being able to walk, instead of slithering on the icy metal flooring like a slug, leaving behind me a trail of what is left from the body of a human woman. I am grateful to still have my mind and my voice, so that I can record what it is like to be part of this historic moment of cosmic connection. Don't be afraid when you, at last, are standing face to face with one of these beings. Though they might not resemble anything you had known as extant on our planet, or look like everything that was ever there all at once, they do not mean you harm. To remind you, they don't even know what harm means. In the centuries past, they have already incorporated the characteristics of various animals from Earth, and they particularly like different kinds of bones and other calcified tissue. You may see rows of teeth and gaping mouths that never consume anything. You may notice growths that resemble horns or antlers, but they are of no purpose. You may witness whales that can walk on spider legs or spider bodies mounted on wings. In the past decade, the fashion of having eyes has become increasingly popular on the main ship. And for those purposes, they have even mounted new lights around the vessel, so that the spaceborne can now be seen as some of Earth's animals do, can perceive the riches of the ground I walk on, and gaze upon each other's endlessly varying faces. If only I could myself see their expressions. Do not be horrified, Bobo. Accept it, for it is in your future, and in the future of everyone you know or ever cared for in your human life. You must also understand that the current conditions on Earth are merely the device for making humanity meeker and more malleable for the dynamic change that is to be completed upon your ascension in the convoy. The creatures on the satellite ships are still working through the process of assimilation, but once they can be fully merged into the high society of those that populate the ground I walk on, they too will become spaceborne eventually. What the extraterrestrials have learned from me, and the rest that have already been taken, they have already introduced back to Earth as a preparatory step for your eventual integration, in body as well as in mind. See not your current predicament as slavery, but as the much-needed indoctrination into higher-order thinking and doing. Our cosmic visitors are teachers, far more than they are masters. As a teacher yourself, I'm sure you are aware of the level of authority and dominance that must be asserted to the younglings to make them behave and accept the rules of integration into adult society. This is what has been done to me, and you, and to all. Once humanity has joined them, they shall no longer be alien to us, nor we to them. There shall only be one, in as many iterations as you can imagine. Lastly, Bobo, my dearest little brother, I hope that you too can see Grandfather and me, as we see ourselves. Remember us not as collaborators, I beg of you, but think of us as the guardians of humanity, that would make sure our cosmic legacy survives, so that humanity becomes part of the cosmic catalog that the extraterrestrials had been, are, and will continue collecting within their own growing body. I love you, Bobo. I wish you could still love me too. Do not fight. Accept and persevere.
What you just heard was the first and last recorded letter that my sister Anna had sent me over a decade ago. She was the only one, apart from Mother, to ever call me Bobo. However, she lost that right the minute she decided to board one of those vessels and aid the invader. I no longer care about her fate, and whatever she has become is of little importance to me. Damn be those that accepted another fate, and pity on those that were taken before they could make their choice. If I remember Anna, I will only do so with scorn. She was not a champion of humanity, but became a champion of the invader that would rather see us as accessories than as conscious beings. The few of us left might not have much need for understanding of the wretched beings that have rained terror on our home for the past half millennia. But there is something to be learned from this message. There is indeed something of magnanimous importance that we have to learn to accept, and that should propel us forward instead of pushing us further into darkness. Nothing more human remains on this planet than the ones of us that are here. There never will be anyone like me or you or Joe and Jane. We are the last, the only. And for that fact alone, we must hide to survive, so that this enormous universe has account of us that we shall tell ourselves by living as ourselves. While we might not know what awaits us on the surface if we ever leave our sheltered home underground, and we do not know how many lives the last culling will take, what we do know is that here we are what we have always been: human. No more and no less. Should we perish here, we would have perished as we were born, below the ground that we once walked on as earthlings.
Hey Creepypasta fans, thanks for listening. To connect with and support us, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon links in the description. And remember, stay cosmic.
It was another cold evening in the town of Fernside. The wind blew strongly across the trees as a man in his early 30s dashed through the door of Net Cafe, the only restaurant in town. The winds blew strongly against the row of trees which stood proudly beside the restaurant. Haley couldn't stop staring outside the window from where she sat, just behind the door. She picked up her phone and glanced at the time. It was 8:45. She dropped the phone back on the table, followed by a heavy sigh. The man took off his coat as his eyes surveyed the room. His eyes clashed with Robin, who was just behind the counter, with his earphones to his ear, listening to his favorite podcast. Robin noticed the strange man approaching the counter. "Crazy weather, right?" the man said as he dragged a stool to the counter to sit down. "Yeah, but thank goodness you're here. We have just the thing to blow the dice off your head," Robin said as he removed his earphones to reach a cup behind him. "You look like a guy who likes his coffee black with no sugar, and also a guy who just moved here from the city," Robin said as he placed the hot cup of coffee right in front of Dexter. Dexter smiled before dragging the cup of coffee near himself. He knew that Robin had already blown his cover. Haley picked up her bag and hurried to board a taxi as the winds began to die down subtly. She peeped through the door, but no one was there. She slowly walked towards the counter where Dexter and Robin were talking. "Haley, I hope you haven't been looking for much trouble. What's the matter, dear?" Robin said to Haley as she approached the counter. "Nothing, Robin. It's just my husband. He was meant to be here by 8:30. I tried calling his number, but it isn't connecting," Haley said as she dropped her bag on the counter near Dexter with another heavy sigh. "Don't worry, darling. I'm about closing. I'll give you a ride home, okay? In the meantime, have a muffin and iced tea on the house." Robin smiled at Haley as she walked gently back to her seat. "Dexter, what do you want from me?" Robin said as he grabbed a mug, pretending not to be bothered about Dexter's presence. Dexter would have sworn that Robin wouldn't recognize him. He had spent some extra touches in perfecting his disguise. Silence swept across the whole cafe as Robin dropped the mug and reached for the TV remote. Several thoughts began to stroll through Dexter's mind. He had been searching for Robin for almost 5 years. He didn't know how to piece his words out. He didn't know how to tell Robin that the world itself was coming to its very end. "Professor Constantine, we need you," Dexter said in a very desperate tone as his eyes were already filled with tears. "I can see that the doctor has perfected Project LIV with you. I have to admit, it's a great job he's done despite my warnings. And I guess you need my help to extract LIV out of your body," Robin said as he took off his apron and switched off the appliances behind the counter. Robin grabbed his bag and put on his coat. As he dragged back his sleeve to check the time on his Blancpain-Villeray wristwatch, it was a few minutes past 9. He reached for the door and spotted Haley, who was already waiting for him. He turned the doorknob as they all strolled out of the restaurant. He took a glance at Dexter, shook his head sideways to indicate his disappointment before turning the open sign to closed, shutting the door and strolling towards his car. The winds had calmed down as he stopped short in front of the vehicle. Robin started the car and sped onto the road. They had barely driven far when Dexter began to feel lightheaded as he asked Robin whether he could drop and get some air, but Haley wanted to get home as soon as possible to pour out her rage on her husband. But she agreed to him getting some air for a little while. Robin wasn't in support of the idea either. He still didn't fully trust Dexter, but he stopped beside the road and Dexter quickly alighted from the car. Haley also agreed to get some air, so she followed him. Robin leaned back in his chair and set a timer on his watch for 5 minutes. He thought about what Dexter had said back at his restaurant. Why did they need him now? Robin thought. The duo wandered off onto a nearby path, chatting along the way, and Robin soon lost sight of them as a stream of thoughts rushed into his head. Robin suddenly jerked at the buzzing sound of his 5-minute timer. He had been lost in thoughts. He noticed that Haley and Dexter were not back yet. That was strange, he thought, so he decided to go after them. "Dexter?" She called out curiously, but there was no reply. Dexter had suddenly run off into a nearby alley earlier. He had been acting strange since they got out of the car. Robin approached from a distance and soon spotted Haley, who was walking towards someone that lay on the ground. It looked like Dexter. "Haley! No!" he screamed, but he was a bit too late. A heavy force of energy erupted from Dexter's body, throwing Haley into the air. Dexter rose from the ground with an unreal speed, his eyes glowing fiery red as he darted towards Robin and tried to reach for his neck. "Athena, activate ultrasound boom!" Robin yelled into his watch, which immediately made a subtle ringing sound, releasing a massive surge of energy which blasted off an ear-splitting shriek, knocking the incoming threat out cold. "Haley!" Robin screamed as he searched for her. Haley coughed out hard and answered from afar. Robin ran ahead to meet her, and she was lucky to have only bruised her chin. He picked her up and headed towards the truck to drop her. "I need to get you home," he mused. He dropped inside his truck and returned for Dexter, who was also lying on the ground, almost unconscious. "I killed Maria and Muna, Professor. I don't deserve to live. Please end my life. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore," Dexter said, tears gushing from his eyes before passing out. Ireland, Dublin. "Go to the computer room. Get me the drive," a euphonic voice said to a young boy who instantly nodded in obedience and raced to the room. The drive was on a desk near a computer. As he drew close to pick up the drive, his foot got tangled in some wires, which were roughly arranged on the floor. He tried untangling his foot from the web of wires. Meanwhile, there was a static glitch in everyone's computer in the building. Nobody that was connected to electricity seemed to be working. Something was wrong. "What the hell is going on?" one of the staff yelled as he turned to the guy sitting next to him. A strong wind of confusion instantly blew across the whole building. Everyone mumbled to themselves about the annoying static. Then, all of a sudden, as though responding to their complaints, all the power went off. The young lad in the computer room had just untangled his foot when the power went out. It was pitch black, and he tried to search for the drive when he hit it by mistake, making it fall to the ground. He tried reaching down for it when a dim light displayed bright red on all the consoles. Everyone stared at their computers. The young lad soon grabbed the drive, but just above his head was a 4-foot-tall alien with little wings and fangs. There was a computer which was seated right in front of him just a moment ago. He let out a dying scream as he stared in shock at the terrifying creature. The monitor face, wings made with entangled wires, and eyes made out of digital numbers. "What the?" he exclaimed before darting out of the room. The strange creatures began to creep out of every corner of the building as everyone sped out. It was not long before the entire city was consumed in chaos. Nobody understood what was going on. Laptops, phones, cars, everything that had an internet connection or access to electricity had morphed into some sort of creature. Fern sighed. "Where am I?" Dexter yelled as he stirred awake from the deep darkness that covered his eyes. He was strapped to a bed with powerful contenders that could hold him down if he reacted again. "Athena!" Robin called out to his artificial intelligence robot. He had built Athena himself.
"Yes, Master Constantine,"
Athena said with a static robotic voice.
"How can I be of service today?"
"Run a quick statistics. I want to know how much the Project Live infection is spread."
"Yes, sir. running statistics on Project Live.
After a brief moment, Athena's voice erupted in the silence once again.
I am afraid it has spread throughout the world, Master Constantine.
Dexter had now fully gained consciousness as he struggled to get out of the bed. Robin walked towards him with his hands behind his back. "What have you blockheads done?" Robin said to Dexter with a soft but authoritative tone. "He said it was going to make the world a better place. He said it could help bring back Frank." "I'm sorry," Dexter said. His voice broke as the tears welled up in his eyes. "This is not the time to be emotional," Robin yelled. "I warned you guys to stay away from this project. Many people are dying out there because of your mistakes. Saying sorry won't bring back their lives." Robin was obviously angry. He strolled towards his seat, sat down, and exhaled deeply. He knew this day was surely going to come, and he had been preparing for it since Dr. J, his best friend, stole his idea. Humanity doesn't need machines to help them evolve, he had always told Jay, but was always blinded by his pride and longing for power and control. Robin had to abandon everything behind just to start a life of solitude. He had done a lot of terrible things to people from the time he was a Navy SEAL up till the very moment of his research days. He had seen all that life could offer. No amount of money could sway him anymore. He had enjoyed a lot of respect and influence he always wanted as a kid, but it wasn't enough. He wanted peace. Robin immediately stormed out of his thoughts. "Athena, launch wave," Robin said in an optimistic tone as he rose from his chair. Dexter was staring at him in confusion. He was sorry for his mistakes. He could have killed Haley. Haley woke up next to Dexter. "Welcome back, young lady," Robin let out jokingly. Haley wanted answers to what was going on, but she knew Robin was the last man to give an explanation at this drastic moment. Wave was ready. It was in the form of a flash drive, so tiny you could mistake it for nothing. "How is that supposed to help?" Dexter said in a hushed tone. "You know why I like Batman?" Robin asked sarcastically. "It's because he always has a contingency plan for everyone he works with. For all projects I've ever created, I've always created a backup plan to take it down if anything goes wrong. For all our sakes, let us hope this works," Robin said as he held the wave drive towards the fluorescent bulb that hung above his head. Dexter had a hunch of what Robin was planning. "You're going to Germany?" Robin remained quiet, but Dexter was persistent. "I want to help out any way I can. How do you intend to get the German HQ to implant this and avoid getting killed by those things out there?" "First of all, there's no we in this. It's only I who is going to implant this. You folks are down and need time to recover. For the meantime, Athena takes me to HQ Germany," Robin said as a portal appears and sucks him in. Dexter started shaking so fast that the straps were starting to loosen. Haley focused her eyes on him, avoiding not going near him because of what had happened to her the last time she did. With her experience as a biomedical scientist, she instantly grabbed an anesthetic injection from the table beside her and injected it into Dexter as he slowly passed out again. "Did he just walk into a portal?" Haley let out in confusion. Robin arrived at HQ. The whole place was damaged by the electronic devices which were now turned into lethal creatures. Governments around the world attempted to find a solution to the crisis which now ravaged the world. Robin needed to stop the madness before it got out of hand. "Athena, shut down every electronic device in the area now," Robin said. A loud clatter was heard, like the sound of falling parts. "That's why you're my girl, Athena," Robin joked. Right in the heart of the building was Jay. Despite what had happened, the aliens didn't seem to attack him. It was almost like he loved as he controlled them. As long as he had the LIVE drive at hand, he saw himself as the most powerful person on Earth. Robin had just walked into the room where Jay was dotted. Well, well, well. Look who we have here. Oh, just shut up, Jay, and quit acting like a child. Robin interrupted his speech. You'll definitely not escape from this destruction that you have caused, Robin added. I guess we'll see about that. Jay frowned as he flicked his hands towards Robin, signaling all the electronic creatures to charge towards him. I rule the world now, Jay added. Let's make this quick, Athena. Athena, execute Project Wave.
With pleasure, sir.
Athena said. Didn't know you had a sense of humor, Athena. A massive pulse exploded throughout the place as all the creatures disintegrated into nothingness. Police sirens blared in the distance as Dr. J attempted to escape.
Not today.
Athena let out, shooting him down with a stun gun as Robin strolled out of the scene. Hey, Creepypasta fans. It's Thomas. Thanks for listening. To connect with and support us, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon links in the description. And remember, stay cosmic. Milos Island, Cyclades, Greece, Tuesday, 21 hours, somewhere underneath the catacombs of Milos. The dawn of a new dusk was gingerly approaching. I could tell from the sleek black digital clock behind the speaker, its red digits pulsating like a timer to the start of something, or an end. It's funny how time worked both ways. It could be moving to an end or a new beginning, yet every end was a doorway to a beginning, and every beginning a doorway to an end. Something had to be beyond it all, a nexus connecting it all. I hadn't felt so exhausted and yet so excited at the same time for an age. Could it be true? I repeatedly thought to myself. We finally cracked it. Our knowledge of the multiverse was only a tiny fragment of what we knew in a much grander scheme of things. So, where are we? Anton Leatherman said, snapping me out of my reverie. You were talking about a dying star, Olivia Alma said, like a prompt reminding an actor of their lines. Right, Anton said, then turned to me. You see why I asked for this meeting to be held as soon as possible. I see. It's riveting. It's more than just riveting, Foley, Anton went on. It's a reality, and the Maktus could be the first to experience it if we act fast enough. And do what, exactly? Brad Fletcher asked, a tinge of unbelief in his tone. And do what? This should be good, I thought. I liked hearing them rummage through sensitive issues like this. It usually meant the solutions were impeccable. After all, we were called the Maktus for a reason. 6 of some of the brightest minds alive, united by a hunger for truth at all cost. Or so we believed. That's where the dying star comes in. For a noted cosmologist, Anton was rarely excited about anything other than his wife, or working with Ramsey Gamal, his expert on occult astronomy, who was also in the room with us. What about the dying star? I asked, wondering what a star had to do with anything, yet knowing well enough to let things unfold at a steady pace. A lot of people argue what happens within a black hole. Now, though most of these theories ring true, a few dying stars speak more deeply than what meets the eyes. Oh, for the love of God, speak English, Anton, Olivia said, agitated. You're not telling a story. This isn't Lord of the Rings. There's a star called Eden, Anton replied, ignoring Olivia's comment. The second and probably the last of its kind. Unlike other black holes that form when a star collapses in on itself, an Eden black hole becomes a nexus point between this universe and realms beyond. Realm? I asked in disbelief. Surely you're not talking about something supernatural? Anton cracked a smile. An overwhelmingly large part of the universe remains unexplored, unknown, and thus there's a chance that laws of physics vary. It's only logical we believe that whatever dimension led to our very existence be unknown too, and therefore is beyond our understanding and our laws of physics. So you're saying we might be visiting the realm, I put the word in air quotes facetiously, responsible for our universe? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. When did you become a religious man, Anton? What is this, a trip to heaven? Olivia asked, laughing. What about the Big Bang? I asked, ignoring Olivia's banter. Take out everything in this room to its smallest indivisible form, and you'll find one thing. Sound. Anton paused, letting that sink in. You can't have a Big Bang without sound, and you can't have sound without a source. So, we're going to find God then, I said, and a few of the others chuckled. It's more like going to the other side of paradise. Ramsey Gamal, Anton's partner back in Egypt, spoke for the first time since the meeting started. To what end, Anton? Brad asked. Among the six of us, he was the least patient. Enlightenment, Anton replied. Humans are nothing without enlightenment. It's why we keep evolving. And this brings me to the final step to enlightenment, the doorway. A doorway? Brad asked, skeptical as if he couldn't believe his ears. We're gonna walk through a doorway to the end of the universe. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. You gotta be fucking kidding me. I was lost, and for a group with so much knowledge on a vast number of topics, talking allegorically wasn't really our way. The fundamentalists knew this ancient path long before the talk of timelines and multiverse theories came into the picture. What we know about the unknown world is very little compared to what actually is. We don't even know enough to call it knowledge. All we have are scattered fragments of something so vast, it possibly could be anything. We could walk through the doorway and enter nothingness. We could walk through the doorway and find what we truly seek, a life beyond ourselves. Trust me, my brothers and sisters. Trust me, interrupted Ramsey once again. Have you ever tried this before? I asked, looking into Anton's eyes with a piercing gaze. No, he answered honestly. Yet my intense research with Gamal points to a doorway that opened up to one man who went to the other side on the same day an Eden black hole was formed not too far from the galaxy Andromeda. How do the two connect? I don't know, but he clearly states it in his journals. A year later, this same man returned to our world and went on to be the brightest mind alive in his time, even stretching throughout history. A man who came up with the concept of time dilation, the same one who came up with the relativity theory, Albert Einstein. There was a pause in the room as everyone held their breath, absorbed in their own thoughts. I have the journals. I could show them to you. It's remotely possible another black hole is being created today, isn't it? I asked, seeing a glimmer of light in what he was saying. By my calculations, it should be right at this very moment. Anton was fired up with possibilities of what he could do. And where's this doorway you speak of? Right here, he smiled. It's been right here the whole time. Beyond the doorway. We walked through, yet everything seemed to be normal. No bright light, no special effects, no unicorns or fairies, goblins or orcs. No advanced civilization or intrinsic ecosystem. Shit, there wasn't even nothingness. Hell, it was almost like we all just walked through a regular door. I was boiling with rage. What the fuck, Anton? I turned to blast Anton for taking us for complete idiots. But he wasn't there. No one was. In fact, the door I had just walked through was gone. It was strange because only a minute ago I was standing in this same room beneath the catacombs. Then I walked through a door, only to end up in the same room again, but this time without the door. My mind started to revolt from the unreality of the situation. Was I losing my grip on reality? Didn't any of the things that just happened happen? What the hell was going on? My mind churned with a billion thoughts and processing at an alarmingly low speed as far as I was concerned. This was probably what going mad felt like. The constant desire to want to reassure oneself of sanity, even if it meant holding on to an illusion. Knowing I'd lose my mind if I spent more time there in the catacombs of Milos, I walked towards the exit in long strides. An old oak double door with two huge brass knuckles to aid in pushing it open. The door was made so that once sealed from inside, it was almost impossible to open from the outside. I pushed through into the catacombs, an intricate web of tunnels covering a third of the island, and responsible for killing over 2/3 of its tourists. An attraction site for the lost and dead, it was fondly called. I had been down there many times since I founded the Maktus in 1999, over 20 years later, and we hadn't grown in number or decreased. Yet the 6 people who were sworn brethren of the Maktus didn't know much about each other than a few surface details. The only one I knew well enough was Anton Leatherman. We had both been in the SAS, until we had had enough of killing and tried a different approach to life, called preserving. He went on to read cosmology, breaking every ground breakable in the known areas of his field. If there was one man who knew what the hell was going on, as long as it wasn't some kind of bizarre prank, it was Anton. I needed to find him. But how? After skillfully maneuvering my way out of the twilight of the catacombs, I stepped out into the open, and what I saw cut me to the quick with pain. Nothing. Exactly. I saw nothing out of the ordinary. The streets, the people, the buildings, the machines, every single thing was normal. For over 20 years, the core desire of the Maktus had remained the same, to discover enlightenment beyond mere humanity, Anton being the most enthusiastic of us all. And in that very moment, I asked myself, was it all a lie? Without wasting too much time on thoughts of what had gone wrong, even though I'd be thinking about this for the rest of my natural life, I dashed for a cab. I needed to find my way to the airport. I needed to find my way to Egypt, to Anton, and possibly strangle the bugger with my bare hands. Cairo, Egypt. 2 hours and 45 minutes later, I was in Cairo, making my way to Anton's home. On the flight over, I had done nothing but feel rage and let my mind churn on the absolute ridiculousness of everything. I'd lost family, I'd lost time, and I'd lost myself, being a full part of something I felt had purpose. Now I felt like an idiot, and Anton was just stringing us along. The drive along the dusty road to Anton's home took about 30 minutes, but it felt like an age. I paid the fare and raced with anticipation to Anton's front door, a moderately adorned home in one of the classier suburbs of the city. Without knocking, I pushed through, yelling his name. "Aaron?" came his reply, with shock on his face that could only mean one thing. There was definitely more to this story. Without saying anything, I sucker punched him in his lower abdomen with so much force I could feel the breath wheeze out of him. Pulling him up again, I punched once more, but this time on his face, sending him to the side. I have one question. Why? My eyes were pleading with the man who I'd come to know as a brother, the man who I had fought with, bled with, and even found some measure of redemption with. The man who I was willing to fight with, bleed with, and preserve life with. I don't know what you're talking about, Aaron. I don't. For some reason, he didn't attack me or fight back, which was odd. What do you mean you don't know? How are you even here? We were all just together down at Milos. We walked through a door together. How the hell are you here, Anton? What the fuck did you do? Dad, a tiny voice said from behind Anton. What's going on? As Anton turned to look at the boy, I could see him soften a bit, like a father who loved his fragile child. I had only met Anton's son once during his early stages in life. It had been 7 years or so since then, and the boy had grown. I was about to smile when I noticed something about the boy. He seemed to be standing there, but something about him didn't feel quite right. It was like I was watching an image on television, but then I could actually touch the person if I wanted to. To satisfy the curiosity tugging at my already weary heart, I walked towards the boy with a somewhat forced smile on my face, since I didn't know what I was dealing with, or if I was plain crazy. Hi there. Remember me? I said, grinning, and reached out my hand. Don't do that, Mr. Foley, Anton said, which was strange because he never usually addressed me so formally. Why do you sound like that? I swayed my head towards him and asked. He just stared at me almost blankly, yet it appeared as though he was seeing right through me. Ignoring it as a fit of paranoia, I turned to look at the boy, but he was gone. Something felt uneasy about the whole room. The sudden urge to get away from Anton's home ran through my being. I never doubted my instincts before, but at this point it made me wonder, what the hell is going on? I'll head out, I said, unsure of what to say next. Maybe find the others, see if they know anything that might help me understand the last 4 hours. Do you need to? Anton asked. I mean, you could just be one guy in a mirror world filled with billions of people. What does that even mean? What are you not telling me, Anton? I was getting disturbingly wary about Anton's demeanor. What if you did reach the end of the universe? He paused, letting the statement sink in for effect, but found a mirror dimension instead. A world that's maybe only a projection of the world you left behind. A reflection of the life you once lived. Left behind? You make it sound like we're dead. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the notion. Without acknowledging my reply, he went on talking. Think about it. You find the edge of the universe, but it all ends right here. A mirror dimension, a small fragment of a larger multiverse. I'd say you're rambling, I replied point-blankly. What did you expect to find? Little green men? He stared intently at me. Another world? Perhaps. And there you go, shooting your own self in the foot. There are things man will never get access to without being connected to a certain reality. And only in that reality can a human even start to understand enlightenment. A reality? Aliens, then? My mind churned with thoughts at that moment. Thoughts upon thoughts upon thoughts. Alien to you, yes. But until you know, until you understand this reality that I speak of, everything will be alien to you. That was it. I had heard enough, and so I quickly headed for the door, then into the street, all in an attempt to reach the others who I believed would have more logical answers as to why the so-called portal door hadn't worked. It started to rain. The clouds were dark, but not that way about half an hour ago when I entered Anton's home. With an unforeseen outburst, the downpour started, pounding away at everything it could touch. People scattered for shelter, and I was about to do the same when something else happened, draining the color from my face. A mirror world. What just happened? Everything froze in place. A man running with his dog on a leash, trying to find shelter from the rain. The droplets themselves were still. Nothing moved. Everything was still. It was as if someone had hit a cosmic pause button. Everything stood in place, lifeless yet full of life. Or maybe you're the one who died. A voice I had heard not too long ago said from behind me. I turned and stared into the eyes of my erstwhile friend. Something seemed dark about him, something I had never seen before, like an oily cloud of dark smoke suffusing his aura. What the hell is going on, Anton? I was barely able to suppress the sheer fear in my voice. You wanted to know what lay beyond the known universe, didn't you? He asked, with his arms laced over his chest, like a teacher of some sort. I was too shaken to respond. You see the caution you felt before walking through the doorway, he said, walking slowly towards me. That was a warning. Each step he took towards me was causing my heart to tighten with claustrophobia. His aura was engulfing my senses, and even the air I was breathing seemed to be filled with him. It's like he was distance itself, and yet a different being entirely. I knew one thing for sure. This man was not Anton. Who are you? Was all I could ask. The question is, what are you going to do now that you can't go back? I'll do anything to go back, I pleaded. I don't belong here. But you came here. You made a conscious decision to walk through that door. You made a choice to be here, Mr. Foley. Lightly or not. I don't know what this is, but I've seen enough, and I just want to go back to reality. There's no going back for you, Mr. Foley. In fact, that's why I'm here. To ensure you don't leave. Choices have ripple effects, Mr. Foley. They are inevitable. You may as well have died the moment you walked through that door. The only reason you're still here is because your consciousness hasn't accepted that you are dead. It is torn between worlds, to coin a phrase. The one you left, and this. I started to back up slowly. My head was spinning. Everything felt surreal, but too real to be fake. Yet according to this man in the shape of Anton, I was living in a dream. I turned and I ran. With so much adrenaline, I thought my heart might give out. You can't outrun your fate, Mr. Foley. His voice boomed from behind me with so much authority. The others accepted theirs. Hearing that made me stop dead in my tracks. I turned. Where are they? Where's Anton? Gone. We shall say dead. Unlike you, they soon realized what was required of them. Come to me, Mr. Foley. Ominously he stretched out his hand, the fingers too long somehow. Come to me. Release yourself from this burden. Come to me. A tear rolled down my right cheek with a bitter sting. There I was, only a few hours earlier, thinking Anton had led us to believe a lie, and wondering to what end. When in truth, we did reach the end of something. But it was our end. The end of the universe? I knew not. How do I get out of this place? I pondered with a heavy heart. This cannot be real. It has to be a dream. My own damnation and possible salvation stood before me, masked as my best friend. Suddenly his face twitched a little, alternating between Anton and something entirely out of the ordinary. The flesh moved, shifted, in an almost protoplasmic way, alternating back and forth. The other thing was humanoid, engulfed in a blue flame. The man alternated between a human and the face of a creature with blue eyes and a mane of blue flame. Within the twinkle of an eye, everything twitched back to Anton, and I broke into a sprint in the opposite direction. "You can't run, Mr. Foley. To every beginning there is an end, and to every end is a beginning." His voice boomed again with the authority of someone who was well within his jurisdiction. With those final words I reflected on during our meeting earlier, everything started moving again like nothing had ever happened. The rain thundered on, and people continued to seek shelter. Like ants, I thought. I turned, and Anton had vanished. Vanished. The word sounded strange. "Hey, mister, why don't you get out of the rain?" a man said from under an awning that looked longer than usual, at least long enough to serve as a shed. I was too shaken to realize that everyone taking shelter was looking at me like some kind of weirdo. I turned to the man who had spoken, and it was the one who I saw running for shelter with his dog earlier. "Excuse me!" I yelled, running towards him. The look on his face clearly showed he was perturbed by my sudden outburst of emotion, but I didn't care. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. "What year is it?" I asked almost frantically. "Sir, calm down." He had the hint of an Australian accent, probably a tourist. "Please, what year is it?" I asked more calmly. "It's 2021, he said, still puzzled. "Is everything all right, sir? Are you real?" Oh, crap. The stupid questions were flooding my mind. I was going crazy. The guy started to move away from me, with no regards to my question. "Please, I need answers. Where is this place?" I pleaded. He quickly turned and started for the next awning, but I grabbed his arm. He turned, and we got into a tussle, and then he punched me, and I threw one back, hitting him square on his right cheekbone, causing his right hand to let go of the leash holding the dog. The force sent him tumbling onto the street with a bleeding mouth. Still groaning from the pain and trying to find his bearing, an unforeseen truck, seemingly appearing from nowhere, ran him over on that very street. Screams and shrieks could be heard as bystanders in other awnings rushed to the now deceased dog walker's aid. Then, for the second time, things came to a standstill. Everything froze. "You do more damage than good the more you cling on to this limbo, Mr. Foley." I could sense his aura even before I turned to see him standing under another awning, observing everything, like a predator waiting for his prey to bleed out. "There's only one way out, Mr. Foley." His voice had more intensity than our last encounter. "Come to me." The tears were gearing up to begin their pour down my face in streaks of pain. I didn't want this to be the end. My end. "Anton, if you're in there, if you can hear me..." "Anton is gone, Mr. Foley," he said, cutting me off. "You speak to me now." "What are you?" I asked tentatively. He smirked. I am the one you so eagerly sought. The reality beyond all realities. The forever one. He paused, as if letting that sink in. Then said, I have an offer for you. Accept it, and you return home. Reject it, and your fate is sealed. I was hesitant, yet anything that gave me a shot at getting back to the reality I knew, I was willing to yield to. I'll let you go back to your point of origin on one condition. His gaze was piercing. You yield and listen to my voice, only mine, and in return, I'll show you secrets to live beyond your reality. There have been others before you, and there will be more after you. You are replaceable, and so I give you a choice, Mr. Aaron Foley. Yield and listen to my voice, or pay the price for the choices that brought you here. Silence. Loud, shrieking silence. I accept, I said. Then it is done. He snapped his fingers, and just like that, my whole body slowly faded into a shimmer of dust. The present. My eyes flickered slowly open, almost scared to do so because they had gazed upon the most bone-chilling of things. They opened, revealing a familiar ceiling. I was in my room. It all must have been a dream, I thought to myself, about to sigh in deep relief, when I heard it. When I heard him. It's your new dawn, Mr. Foley. The reality of the Forever One. Hey, Creepypasta fans. Thanks for listening. To connect with and support us, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon links in the description. And remember, stay cosmic.
Captain Nevis, we are aware of your concerns and we have listened to your distress call. I scoffed a bitter laugh when I heard those words. Those cold and meaningless words. I answered, General, with all due respect, you have no idea what you're talking about. This isn't a distress call. This is a cry for help. I am not concerned. I'm fucking terrified for the future of the crew on board the Goliath station. There was a long pause on the other line. I thought the people back on Earth must have been going out of their heads, trying to solve this crisis, trying to find a solution for what seemed to be a hopeless situation. I could clearly imagine the general sweating, frowning, discussing with all the top scientists and specialists that NASA could afford, trying to determine the best course of action to pull us back from this life or death situation. But I was about to be proved wrong. After a quick beep, I heard his calm voice again. Captain Nevis, I understand your urgency, and I commend your passion and loyalty to your crew, your station, and your country. It is with unmeasurable sorrow that I inform you there's nothing we can do about your case. ¿Qué? I exclaimed, convinced that I was hearing that wrong. I'm sorry, General. Can you repeat that?
We can't help you anymore, Captain,
the General repeated. For the first time, I could hear him losing his composure.
It is very unfortunate, and I must apologize in the name of the country. But this is out of my hands now. I wish you the best of luck in handling this situation. It was an honor knowing you, Captain. We will be closing all channels of communication immediately.
No! General, don't you dare hang up on me! Hijo de puta! I yelled and I slammed my hands on the controls of the ship. Before this mission, I would have never imagined snapping at the General like this. But I couldn't believe this. They were abandoning us? Now that the call was over, I could focus once again on the sounds coming from outside. The emergency alarms had been going on for too long at this point, and not a full minute could go without hearing someone scream. Fright, pain, grief. Every minute we were losing someone on this ship, and the General wanted to close all channels of communication? But then, I heard it. That glorious beep that meant someone was about to talk from the base on Earth. My shoulders relaxed for the first time that day when I heard a familiar voice, but my relief was short-lived.
Victor, are you still listening?
She said, Hey, Paige, mi amiga, do you have any good news? Por favor? I asked, knowing in my heart already that we were a lost cause. But I had known Paige for years, since the first day I joined NASA. I trusted her as a human and a professional with my life. She chuckled.
Well, the General heard your last message, so that's good.
But I had known her for far too long to be fooled by that fake laugh. The silence before her next words told me everything I needed to know.
What the General said is true, Victor,
she said.
Well, technically, I guess they could send rescue missions, but most likely they wouldn't arrive on time. And they think it's too expensive. It wouldn't be worth it for them, financially speaking.
I slammed my hands on the desk in front of me again and yelled, Malditos perros avariciosos! But we didn't have time to share our thoughts, and Paige continued explaining.
They're going to bury this case, Victor. They'll hide it from the press, pay whoever they need to pay off, and make it seem like all of you were transferred to other stations. Until they get everyone to forget the USS Goliath space station ever existed.
With all the fear I was experiencing, and all the rage and frustration coursing through my veins at that moment, I didn't mind crying. I barely noticed until I saw the tears fall down on the shiny metallic surface underneath me. How are you even talking to me right now? I asked Paige. What else could I say? The message was loud and clear. We were doomed. As soon as she ended the call, I would have to go out and face the end. I had every intention to keep her on the call for as long as possible. And then, Paige said,
They shut down the Goliath project immediately. They're clearing out the offices and everything already, but I couldn't miss a chance to say goodbye, you know? I love you, Victor. Are you sure there's no way you can fix this from there?
Everything she had told me so far was too much, and the worst things I could have imagined, except that my heart was breaking in my chest, but I knew exactly what to say. I love you too, mi amiga, and I'll see you again someday. I promise. In this life, or the next, I avoided saying out loud, even though the message was clear. But the call disconnected. Then, I realized there was an additional truth in my promise. I would do everything I could, and then some more to get a chance to return home to Paige somehow. The call was over, and I had to do something. I pulled out the mobile device I used to oversee the status of the ship. All the numbers were red. The map was lighting up in red warning signs, and I could easily hear a fraction of the ship crumbling down and falling apart while I wasted precious seconds hesitating. How many people died just now? How many members of my crew have just been buried under the rubble? Who's crying out for help, wishing I would hear? I wish I could tear my heart out of my chest. I wish I could clone myself. I wish I would have been the first one to die to avoid dealing with this chaos. But no such luck. It was time to go out and take action, despite the knowledge that we have just been abandoned by the entire human race. I tried to walk out of my cabin with my head held high. I didn't know who might be waiting outside for me, waiting for good news, a miracle, a sign of hope. But I was completely and devastatingly empty-handed. However, the only person standing on the other side of the door is my best friend and right-hand man, Colonel Jim Martin.
Please tell me you got good news.
Jim told me, and after I shook my head negatively, he tried to stay positive.
Okay, fine. It's worse than we expected, but fuck it. Tell me their plan.
I know for a fact from the look in his eyes that just by my expression, he knew this was worse than anything he could have expected. I let my hand fall heavily on his shoulder and gripped him tightly, silently desperate for his grounding energy. We are on our own, Colonel. NASA has completely backed out. They know we're doomed, and they've let me know. I said very seriously, with my voice trembling, almost imperceptibly. Jim closed his eyes tightly for a moment and took a deep breath. And then, the two of us became exactly who we needed to be at that moment.
No use crying over spilled milk,
Jim said and cleared his throat.
What's the plan, Captain?
I was almost shaking with adrenaline. It was time to get to work. With all our links cut off from the Earth, my leadership over this station had grown tenfold, and the weight of the responsibility was suffocating. But if we were truly a hopeless cause, the least I could do was keep fighting until the end. Find an escape, I ordered Jim. Find the least damaged set of escape shuttles and get them ready. I know we were fucked from the start, Jim, and they're nearly useless at this point. But you have to get them to work. Send a call through the speakers when you get it. Meanwhile, I'll go look for survivors. Jim shook his head and said,
You can go alone. You don't know exactly how bad it is around the station. You don't know the kind of dangers waiting out there. Captain?
Someone has to do it, I exclaimed. Now go, Colonel. It's an order. Vamos! With one last meaningful look, the two of us parted ways. I was well aware there was a big chance I wouldn't see my best friend again. But if I managed to help at least one person to find a way out of here, I would die peacefully, at the very least. So, I didn't wait for an answer from the Colonel. I yanked open the door of the equipment closet that was right outside my cabin, and I geared up. I picked up a large backpack, prepared for emergencies. I got a specialized axe, made with the same material as this entire station. And I put on an oxygen mask as a precaution, already aware of just some of the problems terrorizing my ship. Then, I was on my way. I checked my map and assessed the damage to the station. It was like the scene of a crime. I could see clearly where the problem started. There was an explosion on the engines at the bottom of the station. Something grave that could have been salvageable by external aid. But that one accident revealed just how badly constructed this station was. And it had sparked a chain reaction. Everything that could have gone wrong went haywire. Our greatest problem was that the power of the explosion shook the structure of the station so badly that the parts at the top of the station broke and collapsed on themselves. Several radars simply drifted off to space, but an observatory and entire labs crumbled down and caught by the artificial gravity in our hallways, fell down on the adjacent rooms like dominoes. The walls of the Goliath started to break and shatter and unstoppably bury my crew underneath. We were in the middle of an avalanche of ultra-resistant metal and an ever-growing fire coming from the engines. In a matter of time, both tragedies will raze the station and everyone inside will perish. I don't know if I could have decided by myself which route to take, but there was no need. I heard the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. More and more footsteps coming from my right. I turned around and was met with a stampede of dozens of scientists escaping their workstations, still in their lab coats, but far from the professional team I was used to seeing. I could barely recognize them, and the sight of them nearly made me scream. They started running past me, so desperate they couldn't even see me. Their white coats were stained with oil and dust, and with blood and other fluids. They ran past me screaming, limping, grasping each other for support, or pushing each other in their hurry to escape an inevitable fate. Eventually, some of them recognized me as the captain of the station, and they stopped and crowded around me, yanking at my clothes, trying to pry open my bag, clinging to my arms, falling to their knees in front of me, begging for salvation. I never felt so helpless. They were starting to drag me down while I exclaimed over their voices, Hey everyone, please, calm down, please, you have to listen to me. Let go, hey, stop it!" It was useless. Their cries would drown me out, and their bleeding and broken hands would kill me accidentally before the ship finished its job of falling over our heads and burning us alive. They screamed at me, "Captain, help me! Help me, please, I'm bleeding! It burns! The experiment! Holy shit, the experiment! Captain, you have to get my partner from the fire! I can still hear him! Captain! Captain!" Mercifully, one voice suddenly rose over the rest. "Everyone stop now!" she yelled. I almost didn't recognize her. I had never heard her raise her voice. That was Dr. Anna Wolf. She was the head of the scientific department, which made her possibly the most important person aboard the station after the colonel and myself, which made it all the more shocking to see her in such a state. Her white coat was charred, in complete shambles, blackened and burned, and with large spots missing from it. Her face was red, swollen, burned, and stained with ashes. She looked like she had gone to hell and came back completely changed. Her fellow scientists were so used to listening to her orders that they immediately quieted. Some of them followed the rest and started running away. A handful of what I assumed were the most loyal ones stayed by her side. The doctor addressed me and said, "Captain, with all due respect, but your ship has gone to shit. I watched the research and work of a lifetime of 100 people go up in flames in an instant, taking most of the people working here with it. I only survived because of these kind souls that literally dragged me out of the flames that were eating me alive, Captain. Temperatures you can't imagine. Pain I can't describe. Immediate darkness. Chaos is loud, but not as loud as the cries coming from people burning alive. Their eyeballs popped and leaked off their faces. And I still can't explain the single mutilated burnt hand that I found clutching my robe. According to my calculations, there are more dead people than the living ones on this ship by now. Where's the help that you promised us, Captain? What the hell are we going to do now?" I didn't hesitate. I took my mobile device and handed it to her, pointing at the blinking dot on the map. "That's Colonel Martin," I said. "He's preparing the emergency shuttles for an escape, and he could use your help. There's no hope inside the Goliath space station. Head to this point in the map immediately. Entendido? I will look for the other survivors." I immediately started walking away, knowing there was no time to lose. Behind me, I clearly heard the doctor say, "Captain, if you go that way, you'll only add another corpse to my list." But I refused to believe that. I threw open each door I found, and at first found nothing. Anyone smart enough and still alive had abandoned their stations long ago. I threw open each door I found, and at first found nothing. Anyone smart enough and still alive had abandoned their stations long ago. In my case, abandoning my cabin would have been a mistake. I had been locked up there for the longest time, trying to solve the problems at a distance, but the system was useless and hope from outside was denied. The only thing we had left was a hands-on approach, and I was about to go face to face with the terrors that had attacked my entire crew. The station was extremely loud, between the blaring alarms, the agonizing screams of people, and the general sound of destruction all around. But when I failed to open one door, I got suspicious, and upon listening closely, I became certain that I could hear someone crying inside. The system was so messed up that the pad beside the door didn't recognize my fingerprint anymore. I had to pick up my axe, raise it up high, and slam it down hard on top of the lock pad. The door rattled and opened halfway, and a cloud of dark smoke came out of it. There was barely enough space for me to get in. Once inside, I found 3 women crying desperately. "Thank God," one of them said as soon as she saw me, and then she started coughing violently. There was so much smoke in that room. They all looked so sick, and when they coughed, it made their entire bodies shake and blood dribble from their noses and the corner of their mouths. Immediately, I pulled 3 oxygen masks from my backpack and gave them to the women. They could barely breathe, let alone talk, but they signaled wildly to one corner of the room before slipping through the crack in the door. I moved through the smoke and winced when I found what the women had wanted to show me. There was a 4th woman there. She was trapped between a fallen shelf and a chunk of a wall from the station. She looked half dead already. She wasn't even coughing like the others, but I wouldn't leave her behind. However, before I could say anything, she smiled at me. I hesitated and wondered what she could possibly mean by that. This literally couldn't have been worse. The station was falling to pieces. Could there have been a new malevolent factor at play here? Was there some kind of secret in my own station that I wasn't yet aware of? I didn't have time to ask. She added with a trembling voice. The fire, it released the experiments. Something about those words made me shiver. I could see nothing but utter terror and hopelessness in her eyes. "Tranquila, amiga. Don't worry," I told her. "I'm going to get you out of here alive." But then it was time to move her. I figured the first step was to get rid of the heavy metallic wall squishing her body. She was barely breathing. I had to be quick. I had no idea that weight was the only thing keeping her body together. The instant that I lifted the piece of metal from her body, I heard a terrible crack that made me shudder. It was her bones, losing their hold, breaking down for good, breaking through her skin. The woman gasped for breath, but it was useless now. Dios mío, I wish I hadn't seen that. Her body was almost entirely crushed by the weight that had fallen on her. From her feet to her chest, including one arm, everything was twisted, deformed, and lacerated. The sight of all that blood, her bones, all of her trembling in one last gasp, and the sound of her collapsed lungs giving out in one bloody splatter, it broke the last of my nerves. I let the wall fall down again. I let it happen, and I had to watch her body split in 2, her head falling down by my feet, covering half of my own body with warm blood. I ran out of that room still gagging, but I needed to hurry. I couldn't afford to have a breakdown, not yet. I had work to do, and it was more than worth it. I came across 4 more survivors, dragging each other forward, thinking they had lost it all, but I managed to give each of them an oxygen mask. Those were the last ones I had, so I was quite worried when, once again, I came across a door that wouldn't open. How was I going to help the people most likely still stuck inside? I couldn't hear anybody crying, but it was a big laboratory, And even if there was someone unconscious there, I would carry them to safety myself if I had to. Nothing could have prepared me for the surprise I got after knocking off the lock pad beside the door with my axe. The door slid open with some difficulty because there was a horrifying, nearly indistinguishable mass of human bodies tumbling down after having died, pressing themselves to the door. Maldita sea, I thought. They had been trying to get out, to escape, when the system failed and locked them inside. But for fuck's sake, what happened to them inside that lab? ¿Qué demonios es esto? Bodies burned so badly, they have almost melted together into a monstrous black pile of death. I flinched away instinctively, pressing myself to the opposite wall and desperately wishing to forget this. But then, I heard a voice. "It's the fire," someone said. The change in temperature affected the extraterrestrial substances of our experiments. Forget about the fire and the structural damage, Captain. When this acid expands, there will be no survivors, and there will be no Goliath. I looked around frantically, and at first I didn't see him. The scientist was on the floor, slowly but surely dragging himself forward. And then I noticed his legs, and it was undeniable that he must have come in contact with this acid he was talking about. I couldn't begin to imagine the pain he must have felt. The skin burned until it turned into pitch black ashes, barely sticking to the bones. But he was still alive, and I had every intention of keeping it that way. "This is probably going to hurt," I told him, "but I promise to keep you alive." And then, without any further warning, I picked him up and threw his frail and squirming body over my shoulder. He yelped in pain, and the sounds of his suffering were something I would never forget. However, it was time to run. The speakers came alive with heavenly words from the colonel. He yelled,
Captain Nieves, escape shuttle number 3. I repeat, go to escape shuttle number 3.
Everything hurt. My chest ached, my muscles burned. I couldn't keep carrying my backpack, so I simply abandoned it. I was tempted to leave my axe too, but I didn't know what kind of obstacles were ahead of us. I was running, not even sure if I was going the right direction, just knowing the temperature was rising and we were running out of time. I was starting to feel dizzy, like I could pass out at any minute, always worrying the acid would reach us before we arrived at the escape shuttles. After what felt like the longest journey of my entire life, I finally caught sight of hope at a distance. The area around the shuttles was a mess, and people were stumbling inside the shuttles desperately, as they probably should, but it looked like heaven to me. Loehisimos. We really fucking did it. When I arrived there, I passed the scientist on my shoulders to the doctor in charge and let his colleagues take care of him. Then, I very nearly collapsed in the arms of my best friend. Jim looked almost as exhausted as me, and he was covered in oil. I'll never forget the words he said to me then.
Victor, we made a few rudimentary changes to the shuttles to get them to work and to accommodate as many survivors as possible. The odds are against us, but I believe we have enough oxygen and fuel for most of us to make it to the nearest space station. What do you say, Captain?
It was exactly what I needed to hear. It was time to put on our suits, start the shuttles, and get the hell away from this burning, shattering, disintegrating piece of metal from hell. All I had to say was, "Muy bien, I say that I won't let the world forget about the sole survivors of the USS Goliath space station."
Hey Creepypasta fans, it's Keon. Thanks for listening tonight. If you'd like to connect with and support us, make sure to check our Patreon and Discord links in the description below. And remember, stay cosmic.
The Dark Cosmos presents The Lost Astronaut. Our mission was officially a success. Kiara and I embarked on a mission to release a new satellite in space, and our job is finally done. We were ecstatic. The two of us met years ago, right at the beginning of the program. And now, here we are, a couple of young astronauts celebrated by the entire world after successfully releasing a satellite in a previously unexplored area for humanity. This was a big deal. The things that this satellite would detect could change our perception of the entire universe. Not bad for our first mission in space. It was just the two of us in that ship. We were still celebrating, not too far from the satellite we left behind, when the news surprised us. We were not alone, here in this unfamiliar territory. Kiara laughed when she saw me hunched over the controllers of the ship.
Sean, will you please relax?
She said.
We did it! Now we get to relax and enjoy the trip back home.
I shook my head in response. Hey, there's something wrong. Look, our sensors detected something nearby. I told her, pointing to the unexpected little blue dot blinking on the screen in front of me.
That can't be right.
Kiara coughed. She looked as startled and concerned as me. It's not that we were considering the possibility of an alien spaceship. But this couldn't be good. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Are you sure it's not a mistake? Maybe it's the satellite.
No. I shook my head and explained. The satellite is over here. This is something else. But, Kiara, the way our scanners detect it, this thing is from NASA.
What?
My partner exclaimed. I knew it sounded crazy. Nothing from NASA was expected to be anywhere around here.
So what? It's probably a stray old satellite, dead and gone, out of orbit, sad but insignificant, right?
You think? I asked her. I seriously had doubts, and there was an itch under my skin, urging me to find out more about this little surprise in the middle of nowhere. Plus, I wasn't quite ready to go back home. Do you want to go check it out? In response to my answer, Kiara shook her head slowly, but she smiled mischievously. I knew my friend. I knew she felt the exact same instinct for adventure. So, in the blink of an eye, we jumped back on our seats, changed the course of the ship, and exchanged looks of excitement. We were all right. We had more than enough fuel and resources to afford a small detour. These long missions were expected to take years. This wouldn't be a big deal. We could barely contain our excitement. That is, until we got to see exactly what was that unexpected company we had. When we got a view of it, at first, we were stunned into silence. Our brain couldn't process what we were seeing. Our confusion was overwhelming. And then, suddenly, Kiara grasped my arm tightly and gasped.
Thomas!
What? I exclaimed with furrowed brows.
Thomas Torres, 20 years ago. The Lost Astronaut?
Holy shit! I exclaimed. This time, our silence was even greater. Our thoughts were running several miles a minute, and there was no way to put what we were feeling into words. I remember bonding with Kiara and other friends in those early days of training about how the legend of Thomas Torres inspired us all to dream of becoming astronauts. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that I could be so close to the legend itself. Are you sure? I mean, it's very, very unlikely, right? His ship malfunctioned and went off radar 20 years ago, Kiara, I said with my eyes still glued on the scene in front of us.
Exactly.
She replied with absolute confidence.
Think about it, Sean. There's nothing supposed to be here but us and the satellite. Nobody back home knows about this thing floating here, but nobody was searching this area. You can't look at that thing and assume it's anything but a lost spaceship.
She was right, and I knew that. We were watching an old model of a spaceship that still somewhat resembled ours. It had missing pieces floating all around it, like the rubble of a broken dream. I remember the entire world mourning the loss of Thomas Torres. This is horrible, I sighed.
Can you imagine what it must have been like?
Kiara said. Her voice was distant, and her eyes were sadly dulled.
Picture yourself single-handedly piloting the biggest spaceship in history so far, knowing the entire world was out there cheering for you, and you're so far above the earth, you're like a god. But then you realize you're also all alone when problems arise. When the first alarms go off, just to never go quiet again, one after the other. They're not helpful. They're only frantic announcements of your inevitable demise. You try everything you can. You put years of training and studying to work, and it's useless. There's infinite darkness around us, walls closing in, oxygen running out. You can't even predict how long it will take you to die. You just know you're never going home again.
When she was done talking, I felt like a ghost has passed through the cabin. I feel a chill down to my bones, and something in my heart breaks irreversibly. But Kiara isn't doing much better than me. In fact, she seemed so troubled, as if she had unwillingly fallen into a daze. She only came back to herself when she felt our ship start to move again. We were moving forward, toward the missing ship.
What are you doing?
She asked me, confused and only mildly alarmed. I couldn't say out loud that the main thing pushing me ahead was curiosity. I just hoped she felt the same way. Instead, I said, "I think he would like to go back home, don't you think?" She smiled as soon as she heard my words, and then I added, "If we can find his body and bring it back, he will come back like a hero." Kiara chuckled, but sat down next to me, and we began an improvised rescue mission. It was a long and complicated process, since there would be nobody on the other end to reply and allow the connection between both ships. We had to maneuver our ship as well as we could to make the connection by force. It wasn't too grave that we couldn't achieve a clean and secure connection. We would still be crossing the gates between both ships wearing our suits, which provided enough safety and oxygen for us to move confidently. As fascinating as this adventure was, we knew we had to act quickly. If the trash floating around the ship crashed with ours too badly, there could be serious consequences. Opening the gates of the abandoned ship wasn't easy. It required all our strength combined, but finally, we got the old bolts to give in. We hadn't even entered the ship when we received the worst sign of danger. There was a sound coming from inside. The second the door opened, we clearly heard scuffling sounds in the depth of the dimly illuminated hallways. I heard Kiara gasp softly, so I attempted to joke. "It's okay. It's probably just a stray cat." My partner rolled her eyes.
Then I just hope it didn't find the pilot's body before us,
she replied. I grimaced and refrained from adding anything else. We crossed the gates, locked the doors behind us, and then we were officially in the ship of our long-lost hero. The fact that we could find his body around any corner gave me goosebumps. Or maybe not find his body? On top of our already emotional mission, there was the unsettling place we were in. To say the ship was eerie would be an understatement. It wasn't completely quiet, which really surprised us. I would have expected this to be the quietest place I'd ever been in, but it wasn't. It was like the ship was still breathing, like it still had a heart and pulse beating quietly and arrhythmically everywhere we stepped. Additionally, it looked in better conditions than we expected. The emergency alarms had to die out at some point, but the lights, even now, were flickering ominously above us the entire time. This is in surprisingly good shape, don't you think? It's still mostly in one piece, I said conversationally, and Kiara hummed in agreement. Then, as if to prove my point, I nonchalantly knocked my fist a couple of times on the wall on my left as we walked. I swear I felt my heart stop for a second when I got a reply. An identical, but considerably louder knock came from the other side of the wall. I jumped backward and crashed against Kiara, who yelped in surprise. "Did you hear that?" I exclaimed.
It's okay.
She said in a tone of voice that sounded everything but okay.
It's, probably some loose pieces of the ship falling down at the slightest touch.
Yeah, right. I cleared my throat. Let's just get this over with. Instantly, we started walking again, keeping a cautious distance from the walls and keeping quiet about the shuffling sounds we heard all around us. We attempted to be quick, but right when we turned the first corner, we gasped in surprise once again.
Well, damn.
Kiara laughed.
Looks like running out of oxygen was not one of our friend Thomas's concerns.
Her words were in allusion to the room we found ourselves in. Apparently, Thomas Torres' ship was equipped with a very nice laboratory that included a secondary supply of oxygen, a greenhouse. But over the course of the 20 years since the ship's disappearance, the plants had expanded over their safety containers. And now, Kiara and I were staring at a little wild jungle in the middle of an abandoned ship. At first, we laughed, marveled at the fairy tale-like scene. But then, 3 things happened in rapid succession that changed everything for us. First, there was the shadow. My partner was studying the laboratory, but I had my eyes fixed across the room. There was something there, something moving, some kind of shadow. I thought it could be smoke, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I was holding my breath, and when I opened my mouth to say something, the figure moved away, rushing into a different hallway. I took a step forward, ready to do something, anything, but Kiara stopped me. She was frowning as she studied the wild plants surrounding us.
Sean,
she called me.
This is very strange. It's surprising enough that the plants managed to break out of their enclosures and survive, but look at the structure surrounding everything. All of this had been modified. Thomas must have found a way to expand his supply of oxygen.
But that surely can't be enough to keep a person alive, right? I asked her, a little distractedly because I was desperate to mention the presence I noticed a moment ago. However, I was interrupted again. No, it is not enough. But I've been living for 10 years with only half of everything, so who cares? My partner and I screamed and jumped at the same time. We turned around so hastily, we nearly stumbled down, and Kiara gripped my arm tightly.
Fuck!
She exclaimed with a broken voice. Thomas Torres was alive. The legendary astronaut that went missing and became a generation's hero. He was standing right in front of us, with a beating heart and breathing lungs. I would recognize this man anywhere and any time, but that wouldn't have been necessary. His situation was one of a kind in history, and on this monumental occasion, all I thought to say was, 20 years. Huh? The old man barked at me. It's been 20 years. Not 10, I stuttered.
Whatever.
He waved a wrinkled hand and his frown deepened as he studied us.
Listen here. The pathetic resources I have are barely enough to sustain me. There's no space here for another family. Now get out of my house!
The heartbreak I felt was reflected in Kara's expression. Our childhood hero had succumbed to senile dementia.
Sir, I just want to say, you have been such an inspiration and—
Kara attempted to say, but he rudely interrupted her.
I said get out!
Thomas yelled, so impassioned his frail body shook and a trail of spit fell from his dry and cracked lips. I think Kiara tried to argue, but I didn't listen. My eyes were focused elsewhere, a few inches above Thomas's head. At first, I thought it was nothing, but the thin trail of dark smoke quickly became undeniable. My eyes trailed upward, following the smoke that seemed to lick down from the ceiling down to the old man. What I saw shocked me to my core. There was a hole on the ceiling of the laboratory, and from it was hanging a black claw, something straight out of a nightmare, something reptilian, slender and long and moving straight down to Thomas. "Move!" I yelled and pushed him and Kara away at once. The three of us stumbled down to the floor in time to watch that wretched beast fall down from the ceiling.
My dear!
Thomas exclaimed at the same time that Kara yelled.
Demon!
Personally, I had no time to name that disgusting creature of long and deadly claws with a cloud of black smoke sticking out of its body. I jumped to my feet and started dragging the old man away toward our ship. He started struggling immediately. Kara helped me, and we both tried our best, but as we neared the exit, Thomas fought harder against us, and he desperately yelled incoherently, until we finally understood him.
Let me go! Let me go! Let me go! I can't leave! She's my ghost! She's mine!
He said loudly in a hoarse voice. Ghosts aren't real, sir. I weakly tried to reason with him.
You don't tell me how to quote things you don't understand, boy! Now either you let me go, or you stay with us. She hasn't left me alone in 20 years. I'm not leaving her now!
Kiara understood before I did. She let go of his arm, and the old man fell down to the floor with a thump. He was crying so hard. My partner and I were clear on something. This man was not going to come with us, and nobody on earth would ever believe what we just experienced. The only thing we could do was save ourselves before it was too late, before it takes us to.
Death is but a portal to a world beyond, and waking life, perhaps a mere dream. Attribution unknown. Set. Go. Boom. A spark. Set. Go. The blast was taking longer than expected. Logan Klein was someone who worked with precision under pressure, but today wasn't one of those days. Marlowe should be back by now, he said, with each hand gripping the handle of an EMP on David Marlowe's bare chest, while glancing at the electrocardiogram, his eyes pleading for results. The chart waves were barely stable. They were losing him, and that wasn't the plan. He should be back by now, he said, still looking at the cardiogram as beads of sweat formed on his head. Then his worst fear occurred. The cardiogram flatlined, causing David to jerk on the stretcher violently before ceasing to move completely. We lost him, sir, an assistant said sadly. He should be back by now, Logan said for the third time, his eyes moist with tears. David Marlowe was the kind of man a lot of people tagged as crazy or a conspiracy theorist. But what made him stand out was the fact that 9 out of 10 times his theories were point-blank right. Known for his great achievements, like being the first scientist to prove for a fact that a thriving ecosystem existed in the Mariana Trench, Marlowe always had a fascination with things too dark or sensitive for other people, like what happened when men died. To put it in blunter terms, he was interested in death. Perhaps a little too interested. Especially after Conrad Donnelly, a dear friend of his, died. Or more appropriately, disappeared into thin air. In the last 2 years after Conrad's disappearance, Marlowe strongly believed that a parallel dimension existed somewhere between the Earth and the Moon, and with the right shot of an EMP based on Conrad's highly secretive research, one could tap into this realm of extraterrestrials dwelling close to Earth. This, of course, caused a public stir, along with a pile of controversy and opposition from the government. But those who knew him knew one thing. If Marlowe had a strong resolve towards a certain cause, only a dead man wouldn't believe him. Within a month after his speech from Langley, Virginia, about the existence of otherworldly beings dwelling closer to home than men thought, a space shuttle carrying a 6-man crew sent on an expedition to the moon mysteriously vanished without a trace. This naturally raised eyebrows at NASA and the government to the possible veracity of his words. The following week, a clandestine movement started, called the Flatliner Experiment, a $10 billion project of taxpayer money to be utilized on a space expedition that could be a hoax, or not. Yet only a handful of people knew what was churning behind the scenes at NASA and the Pentagon. A world in limbo. Everything was dark, pitch black, and without a sound. Not even a breath. Could this be a dream? Or am I just in a coma? Marlowe thought to himself. Even his thoughts felt light, like feathers slowly swaying back and forth to the ground. Then he heard voices. Familiar voices. That's Logan, he said in shock, which caused his eyes to flicker wide open, staring directly into blinding lights from the overhead lamp used in surgeries. They were in Athena's theater room. Usually it would almost fry his corneas instantly. Yet for some reason he didn't feel the light or feel it hurt at all. Something was eerily wrong with this place. And so he sat upright almost immediately after having the thought. Glancing around, he could see Logan Klein, assistant head of the Flatliner Experiment, holding an EMP to his bare chest, while stealing quick glances at the cardiogram with a hopeful look on his face. Marlowe felt his chest, which felt as real as water splashing on a rock. He was alive, but from the looks on the faces around him, as well as the waves on the cardiogram, he had flatlined. He was dead. But he knew this couldn't be death, because he could feel his heart beating with vigor. He turned to look at the stretcher which he just stood up from, only to see his body, dead as a stiff twig. David Marlowe couldn't believe that the procedure had worked. The Flatliner Experiment was a success, an experiment that would give them access to a life beyond death. Yet little did he know that death had lurking plans of its own. Time of death? A lab scientist named Jerry Hogan said to an assistant next to him. "Hold on," Logan said firmly. "David clearly said we should expect this, and if he's not back in 2 hours, call it a wrap. His words, not mine." Too distracted by the faint glow of gold-colored looking light outside the door of the theater room to pay much attention to Jerry and Logan, Marlowe stepped off the stretcher and walked towards the door, curious to what lay beyond. Whatever it was couldn't be the rest of Athena. and he had a strong feeling it was unlikely to be paradise. And so, tentatively, he crept closer to the door, phasing through Logan on his way out. It rattled him, but he was more concerned about the light at the other side of the door. On finally reaching it, he paused, unsure whether to open it or not. He turned to look at his team aboard Athena and could see Logan's forehead covered in beads of sweat, wondering if he had just killed his best friend of 30 years. Marlowe knew his only possible way back probably lay beyond that door, and so he turned and opened it. The light at the other side got brighter as he walked through the door, only to vanish as if it had never been there, revealing something beyond his possible imagination, a settlement as large as a city. In fact, it was almost like he stepped into a major city on Earth, only this one had a nothingness, a great ball of nothing burning in its middle, and it seemed to be expanding, slowly feeding off the city, consuming everything in its wake. Marlowe's eyes widened in horror as he realized what it was. A gravastar, but unlike any he had ever heard of or researched before. This one seemed to consume everything it touched, leaving only itself in its wake. An expanding ball of nothing. Mr. Marlowe, how nice of you to join us, a voice too familiar to be mistaken said from behind David, causing him to turn abruptly. Only then did he realize he had walked through the theater room's door into a balcony of what looked like a penthouse of sorts, high on the top floor of a skyscraper, which explained why he could see the whole city, as well as the impossible mass burning in its middle. "Conrad?" he asked cautiously, with only a trace of latent euphoria. "Yes, Marlowe. How are you? We've been expecting you." Something was way off, and Marlowe could sense it as Conrad, or whatever it was, slowly walked towards him with a commanding gait. Funny, Conrad never called me Marlowe or Mr. Marlowe. "I see," Conrad said, still walking towards him. "Hey, stay the fuck back. I don't know what you are or what you want, but you're not Conrad," David said forcefully. "But you humans and your insatiable desire for knowledge caused this," the being cried. "If only you would have the understanding to know that there are boxes you don't open, lines you don't cross, parallels you know shouldn't even exist. Parallel lines, after all, should never meet. You'd be saving yourselves a great deal of trouble. What are you even talking about? And where the hell is Conrad?" The being paused, almost as if it was relishing a dark thought. "Conrad is gone," it said point-blankly. "Then what are you?" David could feel his heart throbbing painfully in his chest. "Think of me as his replacement, his doppelganger, or perhaps his better half." "You bastard!" Marlowe screamed as he lunged at the being with clenched teeth and fist. The blow connected, but instead of cracking the being's jaw, it broke Marlowe's knuckles, shredding his skin in the process. "You see, I'm not like anything you've come across," the being continued talking, undisturbed by Marlowe's outburst. "You see the mother orb?" he asked, pointing towards the blazing sphere which had grown even larger in size since Marlowe's last look. "It's eating my world, my people, slowly reclaiming everything for the dark cosmos. And just when my people had given up hope, fate charges us to forge ahead by sending a bright deed into a dark world in search of a life beyond your death. Well, welcome aboard, he gestured around with his hands. You just opened Pandora's box, and there's no hope left inside. Marlowe's eyes, as well as his heart, were racing, darting around for a way out. Whatever the creature had planned wasn't good. Tell me, Marlowe said, trying to buy time while his mind worked furiously. How did you get a hold of Conrad's body? Shape-shifting, cloning? Matter of fact, what are you? The creature smiled. We take any form we desire while here. We are sentient symbiotes with an amorphous liquid-like mutation that allows us to survive here without a host body, like your friend Conrad. In fact, until he arrived amongst us, we never knew there was a realm beyond ours capable of sustaining life, not to mention ours. At least those that survive this genocide. What's stopping you from dying anyway while inhabiting this host in this same realm? The words sounded surreal to Marlowe, like a fantasy. When our core died and started feeding off the whole realm, it poisoned the very air we breathe. Yet for some reason it causes no danger to your kind. And just as all hope was faded into oblivion, along you came. Such eager little explorers you are. How unfortunate for you that we would be fortunate to pick up where they left off. That was it. Marlowe had heard enough to know the whole planet was being destroyed, and the bastards needed them to lead him out the same way he came in, since he was the only one who actually made the experiment a success. Without thinking things through, he turned and jumped, leaving a wide-eyed Conrad in his wake. According to his knowledge of Bose-Einstein condensates, and even though this one was completely different, he had one understanding of the events around him. Nothing could ever be completely in free fall around a black hole. At some point, he should be pulled into a curve-like manner towards the ball of flame, which had also slowed down his approach due to the diverted pull of gravity. A wild shot in the dark, but it worked, causing a tiny smirk to form on his lips as he landed on a pavement hard enough to make him give out a stifled cry, but not strong enough to knock him out. Without wasting any more time, his eyes darted around as his mind churned on possible ways to end the pending doom that would befall the Earth if these sentient beings weren't stopped. Around him were things quite similar to materials found on Earth, and then he saw it, and the thought struck him strong, causing an unusual fear to grip him. Just across the street from him was a heavy-duty truck-looking vehicle. It was massive, like 2 Mack trucks combined back on Earth. It levitated, and the best thing about it was it had thrusters, meaning it was hydrogen-powered. A collision force at full speed with the ball of flame, coupled with the stronger pull of gravity the bigger it grew, would blow the whole realm up faster than estimated. But it would cost him his life, his very existence. A trade he was willing to make if it meant keeping these creatures out of his own dimension. Besides, they probably had plans to do worse to him after they got what they wanted. The sudden pull of his weight towards the burning ball startled him. The core was getting bigger, which meant one thing: he had less time than he realized. Dashing for the truck-looking vehicle, he heard a low growl unlike anything he had ever heard before, coming from behind him. Not daring to turn back, he ran faster, the pull of gravity pulling him sideways away from the truck. Just when he almost missed it, he latched onto the door handle and pulled it open while his other hand held onto what looked like a side mirror for support.
He jumped into the truck without a clue on how to work the controls, just as something threw its weight on the truck. It was Conrad, or rather the thing that resembled him. It was incredibly strong and seemed to defy the laws of physics as it punched repeatedly at the glass, hungry to get in. They say instinct makes you do the craziest things when you look death in the face. That was how Marlowe felt as he hurriedly turned a dial he believed to be the ignition button, causing the beast-like truck to roar to life instantly. The dial seemed to also increase its speed, and so he turned it all the way round twice being the limit, just as the reinforced glass started to crack. Marlowe stepped on the throttle, sending the truck into a sonic-like blast aimed directly for the burning ball, which had grown in size too. The creature was latched onto the truck, even at such blur-like speed, and just as it burst through the glass to pull Marlowe out, it was too late, and they both collided into the burning ball of cosmic energy together, causing it to react precisely 2 seconds after collision, exploding into a bright ball of raging intensity, obliterating everything in that parallel dimension. Then it imploded. Athena, 400 kilometers from the moon. Time of death, 3:15 a.m., Jerry told Logan, who hadn't taken his eyes off the electrocardiogram for the last 30 minutes. They had lost him, and whatever it was he had seen was lost with him too. "Sir, he's gone," Jerry said, gently tapping his shoulder. Logan sighed deeply and shrugged. The Flatliner experiments were meant to give them a glimpse into the beyond, as well as possibly save Conrad and the other 6 crewmen who disappeared into the void. Yet it only proved one thing. There existed worlds upon worlds that humankind would never know, and it might do them a great deal of good to avoid peeping through the wrong holes in the fabric of the universe. Hey, Creepypasta fans. Thanks for listening. To connect with and support us, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon in the description. And remember, stay cosmic.